report belongs to the people and they must have a say on it. Yesterday, he dealt politicians allied to Deputy President William Ruto a blow when he ruled out Parliament as a route for the Building Bridges Initiative report, giving the strongest indication yet that the document will be subjected to referendum. Following the report's launch on Wednesday, politicians allied to DP Ruto have rooted for a parliamentary process, while those who support the Orange Democratic Movement leader Raila Odinga have called for a referendum. The phrasing in this is actually quite interesting. Yesterday, Muturi said the report belonged to the people who must have a say on its implementation. So it looks like
so this is the head of Parliament is saying it shouldn't come here.
It shouldn't come here. Or it will not come here because it's the people's.
Yeah, it'll not come here.
Right.
It's a people's document. It's a people's initiative. Let's see how
that
this
sounds
goes.
choreographed.
It's completely.
That's what I was saying. I mean, it does actually.
It sounds choreographed.
It will be interesting to see how things turn out.
There's a while back we talked about donor business interests, investment in this country.
Yeah.
And the East African reported a visit by a delegation of German industrial and commercial giants to East Africa. And they had a report as a result of their visit. And the report states that there's a declining interest. And right now, the interest in investments in these African countries, the lowest is actually Tanzania, according to this report, which is at 25%, followed by Kenya, which is at 62%, Rwanda, 69%. Ethiopia, surprisingly, is around 75%. Now, you will have heard of the electric vehicle or the assembly plant that the Volkswagen company have set up in Rwanda. And they are going to produce electric vehicles. And Uganda and Rwanda will be the first beneficiaries.
They're taking a lead on this.
Well, they're taking a lead. They clearly have an atmosphere that is welcoming to the investors. There is a visit, I think there was a visit by a similar group from Switzerland. Their report isn't out in the public domain as yet, but we will see. What is for sure is that it isn't as though the interests have dwindled or died. It's just reduced. Or, let me say, it's becoming specialized, depending on what it is they want to do. Yes, if they want to set up, say, an industry, they know exactly where to take it. Yes.
Ethiopia has power. Ethiopia has maybe better laws for industries, a more conducive environment for them. So people are going there. Despite all the kind of political turmoil that we're seeing in Ethiopia, day in, day out, it's still being preferred.
So it tells you that political turmoil doesn't really determine whether investors go into that country or not. Because they will look at what probably other business people in that particular setup are, how they're going about their business, and they'll realize that the internal turmoil doesn't interfere with business. They'll be fine with it. Yes.
They're good.
Yes, they're good. It's only when industrialists or people who have invested in the country get targeted that they get scared. But so long as it's just internal politicking and their business interests seem to be uninterfered with, they seem to be fine with it.
That's interesting as you say that, because I remember, even with all the kidnappings out of the Niger Delta, Shell and the rest did not stop.
They didn't move.
They didn't move. If anything, they increased their production.
And yet they were the targets.
Oh yes,
of
they
the
were
kidnappings.
Kidnapped severally. Today's day 8 of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. According to clerics in Kenya, GBV should not be handled by kangaroo courts. The Coast Interfaith Council of Clerics in Kilifi, which interestingly enough is the county that leads with incidents of rape, they say that no form of gender-based violence should be discussed in kangaroo courts. Speaking at Pwani University, they said that those who perpetrate violence against women and children should be heavily punished, and it should actually be dealt with the highest courts in the land. So this is a discussion that's happening. Conversations are continuing around these 16 days. However, there are interesting interventions that seem to be suggested and being brought to light.
Okay. All right.
Interesting, the East African also had as its headlines, this was interesting. IMF sets new terms for Kenyans' 1.5 billion loan after rate cap repeal. The IMF apparently visited Kenya between the month that has just gone by, the 18th and the 22nd of this month, and they had lengthy discussions with central bank governor, the now acting CS finance. They had a discussion with the head of the civil service, and they came up with certain points. Apparently, the two things stand out. One, when it comes to IMF lending, remember they tend to give money to help you sort out your, say, your budget deficits.
Yes.
Okay, and the East African countries came up with an understanding that it shouldn't be more than 3%. Kenya currently, yes, is at 7.7%. Yes, more than double.
Double plus.
Yes. But the recommendations was following. They said that they must cut the budget deficit from what it is, 7.7 to an understandable degree, that is 3%, and implement tax and expenditure reforms that don't hurt the private sector, but also don't stifle economic growth. Now, they'll be back in January for further discussions. Now, of interest, they had, as early, remember, between the year 2016 and 2018, they had approved a $1.5 billion bailout for the country, because it's actually a bailout.
Right.
Yes, and this is something they do very often. You have this budget, there's this shortfall, they come in. But now that they're laying down these conditions, it tells you that they're not actually happy with the way we've gone about managing our finances, taking expensive loans, and ensuring that this very deficit that supposedly we're trying to reduce, it ends up actually being increased as opposed to being reduced.
These guys are shifting goalposts.
They always do.
One of the reasons why we had to repeal that law on interest rate capping was because of the IMF pressure.
In the first place.
Now you go ahead and you change that law, and then they come and say, now, okay, you've done well. However, we want you now to think of, come on, really.
But if you're to go by what they tell you, some of the problems that we still face in this country always arise from either IMF or World Bank, what they used to call conditionalities.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, they tell you to do this, and if you follow blindly, you will have a problem.
Because you move from one to the next.
Yes, you will have a problem. I think it's fair and it's good to listen to what they have to say, and it's good to determine what it is you think will be useful to you. Yes, because at the end of the day, they are a bank, and they are lending you money which you're going to pay. It isn't a grant.
It's not free money anyway.
No, it isn't free. And they wouldn't be having these discussions with you if you didn't have a record of actually paying your debts. IMF we don't owe them money that we haven't been paying.
That's why the conversation can be opened up.
Yes.
It's 6:15. Remember, you can download the Standard e-paper app from Google Play Store and Apple App Store, and then for just one subscription fee, you can either choose monthly, weekly, or annually. You get to access all of Standard Group's publications, plus the daily pullouts, plus the weekend papers and the weekend publications, plus the others like the Mount Kenya Star and Pambazuko. This is a Standard e-paper app only from Standard Group. Good morning.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
It's 17 minutes after 6 o'clock. Good morning and thank you for tuning in. This is Spice FM broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4. We are in Mombasa 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, 97.7 in Malindi. We're live streaming as we always do on Spice FM KE Facebook. We are as well streaming on YouTube and www.spicefm.co.ke. Join the conversation. Tag us on Twitter at SpiceFMKE, and the hashtag is The Situation Room. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, Nduoko. My name is Eric Latif, and we also have C.T. Muga. And C.T. Muga wants to raise an issue this morning that is of national importance, is it?
Well, let me raise it and then determine whether you think it's of national importance. But I want to talk about modern-day slavery. The assumption is that once slavery had been abolished worldwide, beginning with people like William Wilberforce, beginning with the civil rights, the Civil War in the U.S., that slavery had actually come to an end. And by and large, as a legal entity, it had. Because slavery was legal. It's something that it was a business that one could conduct in the same way you conduct the buying and selling of maize, or the same way you conduct the buying and selling of tea or coffee or any product. Human beings were merely a product. But now, in the 21st century, and aided by what we call modern technology, it has actually emerged new, improved, and robust. One of the people, one of the platforms that has come under attack of late has been what we refer to as social media, whether it is Twitter, whether it is Facebook, whether it is Google, but more so Google more than anything else. The BBC has been, for the past week, running discussions on this very, very subject. And it arose from criticism that people had about, one, it began with fake news being housed and using the platform of social media. And that discussion was going on. Then was the issue of slavery. And we refer to it as slavery because people who were marketed as house help were actually being bought and sold using the social media. When I say bought and sold, there were specific sites within social media where you would go to and you would be able to, even in this country, you would actually be able to determine, just like we have, should we say, retail outlets informing you about the things that they wish to sell. You had retail markets explaining to you the individuals that they had, the age, the sort of characteristics, the personality of individuals who you could actually engage, and the people you could go to actually buy. Now, someone would say, no, but you probably engage in them. Well, the BBC team actually went to Kuwait, and they had undercover people who posed as couples who specifically wanted to acquire house help. And the truth of the matter is that everything that they came across with regards to getting this person who would be in their employ amounted to slavery. One, they were informed that one of the things that they had to do, and remember, this is actually illegal in Kuwait. It is illegal. And yet, because of the social media platform, people are actually able to transact. You would confiscate their passport.
Right.
The issue of age did not come into play simply because they looked at what was indicated in the passport. And so long as you bought through registered agencies, everything, or you transacted through registered agencies, the process was considered legal. One, these individuals who worked were not given any time off whatsoever, no time off. And if they reported the matter to the police, the first thing that happened was they were taken to the equivalent of a concentration camp for people who had either entered the country illegally or people who were not there legally. Now, the net result is that once you'd been processed through the system, you'd be deported. Now, deportation in this particular case seemed to be the best way out, because if you weren't deported and remained in the employ, everything that you went through was the equivalent of being a slave. People stayed in the same place or in the same compound, in the same structure as cattle. People stayed in the same structure as goods. Essentially, you live in a store. Your very livelihood and the very, very existence of your being was not only subhuman, but it was dehumanizing. Now, that to me is modern slavery. But that is in Kuwait. In Kenya, many people who employ house help also take their IDs. They live in a room perhaps, they are given a uniform, they are paid salaries that are well below what the government states as the minimum wage. And the issue of offs and so forth is debatable. But of significance, many people in this country employ people who are under the age of 18 as house help. People who actually don't have rights as such. And people who should be protected, not made to work. So when we talk about modern slavery, we must take a very hard look at how we in this particular country manage what we call the industry of house help. Eric, you're nodding.
Well, for sure, it's something that has been debated over time, and not even looking at it from a slavery point of view, but just from the point of view, like, how much should you pay in terms of remuneration for people who work for you? And obviously, oftentimes is the argument that, well, they're living in my home, they get the basic amenities that my children or the rest of my family would get. I feed them, I house them, I provide electricity, water, everything that they would essentially pay for. So actually, the money that I pay them is
It's the
when
extra. It's
collectively,
after deducting.
right? Collectively, it's a lot. It's a lot more than just what enters into their hand, you know. So I mean, actually looking at it like that and pulling apart the nitty gritty maybe helps us to be able to understand a little further what it actually could be. If you're paying the odd 5,000 shillings,
I know.
Against the argument that for some people, what they earn is not doesn't allow them to do as much as they would like to, or maybe what a government directive would be, because then they have to split it among so many things when it comes to rent and other things. However, at the same time, you need somebody who's going to take care of your children when you're not there. So I mean, it's very
It's a catch-22.
Yeah, it really is a catch for a lot of people that, you know, I can only afford so much, you know, and but I still need the services within my home. And, you know, you have people leaving before dawn to go to earn something and then coming back after dark, and you need somebody to be in your home, but they only earn so much and are able to then pay so much. But then likening it to slavery, for them, they wouldn't see it that way. But then some people on the other part of the social and economic divide would see it that way as well.
So what would they see?
For some people, all they see is that this is what I have in my
Yeah,
hand to
this
be
is
able
what
to
I can
take. This is
afford.
what I can afford that can then be able to pay for this service that I so desperately need.
But it begins further up. If what they are earning in and of itself cannot even sustain them,
They are slaves.
precisely, it begins there. So you have a situation where slaves are employing slaves. But let me take the argument a little further. In this very show, I raised this issue some times back with regards to the debts that we have, which I said abrogate certain fundamental rights that we have. Now, when you have a situation where you are constantly in this downward spiraling situation where the debt ceiling in your country keeps rising and you keep being beleaguered by high taxes or ever-increasing taxes, where each and every way you turn, you are being taxed. The only thing you're not taxed to do is to walk and to breathe and probably to be alive. But you are taxed, and you're constantly taxed. Now, the problem with this sort of situation is this. You are pushed to a point where decisions that have been made on your behalf put you in a position where, again, as you say, it's akin to slavery. Because if you cannot actually survive, or you are barely surviving, and it's because of decisions that have been made, and you are forced into a position that you did not, which is not of your choosing, and your existence, again, is not of your choosing, but it has been imposed on you. Slavery doesn't get any better than this. Yes. And this one is worse because it's not something that is going to be passed on to just one generation. It's something that can be passed on generationally. There's a discussion that is taking place about the environment and about greenhouse gas emissions and so forth, and what is actually happening in the environment. Now, this discussion is, well, one, it seems to have stalled, because if I were to go by what the UN Secretary General was saying, that, okay, you get interest groups talking, but governments don't seem to be paying very much attention to this. And yet the world seems to be getting warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer. And it's saying that if it continues at this rate, we get to a point where it is irreversible, and then even the earth as we know it will not. Now, if you are talking about just the concept of slavery, think to what it is the future generations have actually been consigned to, what it is that they will expect. This is not something of their doing, but it will definitely affect their lives. You see, decisions that are made that make your life deplorable, that make your life unhealthy, that makes your life unpleasant, all these things that need not happen to you. If you look at the very, very concept of slavery, this really is exactly it. Like now, every time we complain about our politics, what our politicians do is they keep us enslaved to this politicking throughout. And we, the media, assist them enormously, don't we?
Right.
There's always, so your mind, even
It's
before
consumed.
it's consumed with this.
I think also unconsciously tuned to that kind of thinking, because unconsciously that's where your mind then essentially would go, trying to think about, if you just look at the atmosphere and say, okay, what exactly is happening? Interestingly enough, your first thought goes towards politics.
Precisely.
And who said what, or who you expect to say what at a particular time.
The soft term we use is addiction. You see, addiction is slavery. I mean, you may not think so, but it actually is. It's actually one of the best forms of actually something that captures you and holds you ransom, and you cannot easily escape from. Now, that is a situation that I say we are in. The vicious cycle you speak of, where someone doesn't earn enough but needs assistance. And so this person that they engage, they can only pay this amount of money. This cycle, you see an end to it, no?
And it's interesting, it's actually, as you were speaking, we assume that the person at the forefront is the only one in the cycle.
No.
But you have many, very many cycles turning at the same time.
Yes.
Because you have many individuals going through that cycle, those above in a cycle, those below, as it were, because now we're talking about economic status. Those below on a different level are also in that cycle, whereby they get a little and they're only able to do so much at their level.
Yes.
So it's continued dependence
Yes.
on the person who is above you in terms of your status economically. So you only are able to do as much as really this person allows you to do.
Poverty does that for you because it limits your options. And once it limits your options, then you will do things that ordinarily you wouldn't do. So you're stuck, and you
Just
realize...
say that again. Say that again.
I am saying...
No, I think it's very profound. You would do things that...
No, poverty does that to you. Because you then end up doing things that you ordinarily would not want to do simply because you want to survive.
Right.
So the options you have is survival. Now, when one limits your option to survival, it means the other options have been removed. So you're forced into this, because you're forced into this particular position. And getting out of it almost becomes next to impossible. Now, again, think about it. That is slavery.
You philosophize a lot. You're philosophizing a lot this morning, CT.
I am philosophizing.
It's the beginning of... What are you saying? Are you focusing on domestic workers and slavery?
No,
Are you focusing about the country?
This is a broad sweep.
Like the country, our national
the
debt.
house help was bringing this discussion
contextualizing.
home so that you understand. Because many Kenyans, even the house help, you have house help.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is it. The cycles we're talking about. Right?
So it depends on where that person is coming from. That's why I brought in the concept of poverty or the reality of poverty. When someone is poor, their options tend to be limited by that state that they are in.
But your main issue is about national debt and enslavement.
Oh, yes. I am simply saying this. Let me repeat it so that it's clearly understood. I'm saying that when you get to a position where your country is constantly in debt and the debt portfolio increases instead of decreasing, the country then will set in motion a process where they want to ensure that they can repay this money that they have. Ours becomes a little difficult because the schemes we have are for borrowing more, which means we're going to owe more. So if you owe more, it means the deplorable situation we're discussing doesn't become less. It actually increases.
It increases.
Now, I am saying that if someone puts in a position where the debt isn't going to be paid within one cycle, they're not meant to be paid in 1 year cycle, but it's a generational debt. Now, that person has enslaved you to that particular debt. That's my first point. My second point is this. If you have that sort of situation, it means that even people who are in business will have a problem conducting their business because of the taxes. And they will tell you rightly. Now, this immediately directly affects the employees. Now, when it affects the employees, it will be in terms of the numbers of people employed and the amount of money that they are actually being paid. Many organizations are now asking people to take pay cuts simply because they're not able to pay what they used to pay before. What a pay cut means is that you're able to buy less, which means the very, very income that government gets through taxes is also going to be reduced. This goes, it's a downward spiraling situation where it gets less and less and less. But again, the dependency factor is the constant. We are dependent. We do not have much of a choice.
We're stuck there.
We are stuck.
Let's take a look at the traffic situation and then we come back into this conversation. It's 28 minutes to 7 o'clock.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
It's a Monday morning. Let's see what the roads are looking like right now. Mombasa Road is clear this morning, actually, right about this time. It's not so bad as you're trying to get off to use the bypass or trying to get through to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. It's all right. Thika Road has already started to build up as of this morning. About an hour ago, we could already experience some traffic there. Let's see what it looks like in a short while. Wayaki Way is moving smoothly this morning, despite the fact that it is a bit wet and foggy this morning. So please use your fog lights. Take it easy as you're trying to get out of that particular area. A lot of traffic on Gong Road already at about 6:15. The traffic had already begun. Hopefully it gets better, and this is the early birds trying to get out. Let's see what it looks like shortly. There's been an accident in the tunnel and that has blocked Wangari Maathai Road, so expect some delay at the Pangani underpass very early this morning. The accident has not been cleared yet, and understand that this is in the tunnel, so it's affecting traffic in both directions, and it's quite a bad one. So let's see what it looks like in a short while when the emergency services have been there to clear things up. We'll take a look at Thika Road in a short while to let you know how that looks, and Langata Road should also promise some good vibes for us this morning, but we will let you know. 0719012600 is the number to call should you need to let us know what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done.
So City Buga is raising the issue of rising national debt, and he's saying this is akin to enslavement. But then City, I think this is where the issues come in. You've given us examples of the kind of modern day slavery that we are seeing, using domestic workers, using other kind of workers who are being sold or being auctioned off using new technology,
Social media.
social media, and also looking at how we in Kenya as well, people actually get employed and how much they earn for the kind of work that they do. Domestic workers, security guards, even you'll find workers in construction sites and all. But then now let's take it to the level that you're bringing it up to, national debt.
Eric, if you look at the fundamentals of what you call the human rights, this one I'd better read it so that it is clear and it isn't stating
So
it.
you're not misquoted.
Yes, 25. Despite any other provision in this constitution, the following rights and fundamental freedoms shall not be limited. A. Freedom from torture and cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. B. Freedom from slavery or servitude. C. The right to a fair trial. And D. The right to an order of habeas corpus. Now, I'm focusing on slavery and servitude. And I'm saying that the economic situation that you find in this country, unfortunately, leads us in that direction. And I said, we are led. I gave the example of Kuwait. I was talking about this thing internationally and saying that something that we thought had gone by or had come to an end is actually back. If you look at the number of people from the African continent trying to cross the Mediterranean, trying to cross the seas to get to Europe, and the deplorable condition that many of them find themselves in, assuredly, it is not any better. It's slavery. Why? Because they want to survive and they will put up with almost anything. But what is worse is that they give the impression when you listen to, say, for instance, the interviews of such people, where they've come from, things were much worse. So this situation that I'm describing for them is to be preferred to what they left behind.
Absolutely, and the risk that everybody sees, the risk that you and I see, or anybody who is not in that particular situation, it pales in comparison to what it is that they have left behind. They would rather take that risk than continue to live in those, beyond deplorable situations they talk about, where they would go days on end without food. The little food that they did get, they would give it to the younger the children to consume. So they were thinking, here I am, rather than go back and face what it is that I have come from for a day. Let me cross this sea. Let me cross this choppy, turbulent waters with the hope that I'll get to the other side, and then I have a life whereby I'll be able to support and my family, or at least raise the profile of my livelihood. Now, passing that risk, you would think that it was in your mind, it's unfathomable, but then you also have to understand that where they're coming from in this case, they're slaves to their situation, and they're trying to break free. Yes, to become slaves to yet another situation, but one is better than the other. as far as they're concerned.
It's interesting. Again, there are interviews of these individuals who go through all these dangers to actually get to Europe. And what I found particularly fascinating is that someone lands in Europe, they have no job, they have no home,
No
nothing.
shelter.
Nothing. But they're telling you they are at their happiest.
Hope.
Yeah, precisely. They're saying this is better. Whatever it is, whether I have
And they've landed there in winter.
yes, whether I have to get food from the rubbish bin, he said this is better. Now, so you ask the question, are they saying this because they're simply being interviewed, or are they saying it because they mean it? And then you juxtapose and ask the places they have come from. What did they? What is it that actually drove them away? Because people rarely leave a place of comfort to simply head towards a place of discomfort. It has to be you're at your wit's end and you don't see any light at the end of this particular tunnel. So you figure, I think I'd rather die trying.
Right.
Now, that speaks of immense desperation. Yes. We've spoken in this very show about certain indicators of the sort of problems that the economic situation brings about. Increased suicides, okay, increased killings within homes. Now, if I bring in this matter, remember it talks about this is an absolute right, slavery and servitude, okay? If slavery is a little heavy for you to take in, let's work with servitude. It means you are always beholden. It isn't a choice.
Right. You will forever be in that position.
So
Yes.
who's the slave master here then?
Slave masters are government.
The government.
And the factotums that the government has in place to carry out some of these financial issues and decisions on our behalf.
It's interesting that you say that, because we're looking at forms of modern slavery, and debt bondage, or what you want to call bonded labor, is the world's most widespread form of slavery. When people borrow money they cannot repay and are required to work to pay off the debt, you taxed. And then losing control over the conditions of both their employment and their debt. You don't pay the debt, some of your national assets basically go away into the hands of those who loaned you the money or loaned you that resource in the first place. The most widespread. So you want to think of it that it's something that would have been abolished, but actually it's something that has reared its ugly head once again and is full center, right there in terms of what we have to deal with today. And I can see that as what we are facing today. And we're not talking about those right now in this situation who are going to pay the debt, but it is those in generations to come who are going to be burdened with
but
this.
But in the debt, this is where even Jerry
and
has
that's
been
what he was
raising
saying,
the
talking
issue.
about the fact that it's servitude forever.
However, is the debt not necessary for development?
It is.
Why is the government borrowing? The government is borrowing so that can put up the infrastructure to move us forward.
That is the issue here. No. It is like we have a runaway debt situation. Debt is being piled on upon debt, and what it means is that more and more money is needed to be able to repay these debts.
Constantly living beyond our means.
Yes, and in order to pay for these debts, the only way the government can get money is through its people. So one of the ways is they'll tax you.
Right.
Yes.
The most known way.
Yes.
The most known way is the taxing.
Yeah. But then, of course, it's expected that when the government borrows, it invests in things that are going to help you ensure that you can actually earn more. So
I'm glad you used that phrase, that it is expected. That is what would be done. But as we see in a lot of cases, it is not. Look,
some of them are long term.
Trace. Yeah, sure. But it's easy to trace some of these things, right? And it's easy to trace progress in terms of what has been done. And being transparent then in what you're saying this money is going to be used for, I believe, is one thing that's absolutely necessary to be done. Sure, the citizens of a country don't need to know each and everything the government is doing, but in some things whereby the burden then lies on the people once again to service these debts, especially once we've talked about things like taxation, then it's necessary for you to say, well, these are the projects in which we're going to embark on as a country. This is the reason why we're borrowing this money. And along the line, this is the progress we have or have not made. But when you constantly hear the fact that projects have started and they have stalled, money that was allocated for X project actually then was not used for that particular project, then you want to waver in your trust a little bit.
Eric, take this view, for instance, okay? There is no country on this planet that doesn't borrow at some point or the other.
Yes.
Okay. The fundamental difference is that very thing you mentioned, what it is they do with their money.
Right.
That really is the fundamental, not the borrowing. The borrowing here isn't the issue. If what they say, is going to be done, if the money is actually done, then the situation we speak of doesn't actually arise.
Would not
One,
exist.
and remember, money always isn't borrowed for development. Like the sort of money that IMF is coming up with here, it's supposed to ensure that
Should you need it, you can access it.
you can access it, yes, but it is one, to ensure that our liabilities are met,
Yes.
and so that we don't get negative credit rating. That's the whole purpose. So that in future, should we actually need this particular money, we are able to get it, because it is understood countries will need money from time to time. It's understood. Yes.
But then, I think sometimes you're also bogged down by the kind of scandals that we've seen. So we've 2 dams that have had some big scandal. But that all the money that we've borrowed, the 6 trillion, has not just gone to the 2 dams. There are very many other projects that have actually come to fruition, others that are almost getting to fruition, which will take us to the place where we want to be.
Ideally, they should.
And we'll be able to pay back.
Ideally, they should, Eric, but literally every project that the government has undertaken has come under one, but has had one particular flaw. It's overpriced. It's not that the project isn't there. It's not that it's not being implemented. It is. But what they say it costs and what it actually costs.
Different.
Let's just take, for instance, not even a wild guess, and not even a random guess. Let's talk about something specific, like this equipment that was supposed to have been leased.
Yeah.
Again, it's like every good thing that was set out, when the details of it comes out, there's a scandal behind it. Again, it was overpriced. And then there's the issue of they bought equipment and gave it to people who needed it but weren't ready for it as yet. So the equipment, God knows how many years down the line, still lying idle.
You're paying for it, but then
you can't use it. And when you've paid for it, you won't be able to use it because something will have gone wrong with the equipment. So it's these sort of decisions. So it isn't just one thing. The equipment definitely needed. No question about it. Remember, General Electric, who supplied some of this equipment, were defending themselves the other day in the media. They were saying, look, we actually supplied these things because we're told it was needed. The question of them being needed, not in question. Needed. Okay? But as to whether they could be utilized, different question. Then came in the clincher, cost.
The cost.
How much you were told versus how much we were paid.
Yes, exactly. So these are the things that raise this cost that we speak of. Now, one could argue that, yes, it's understandable that costs may vary, but ours don't just vary slightly. This is the problem. They vary immensely. It's huge amounts.
And I think when you talk about margin of error, there's a margin of error that would be acceptable. You can't have almost half, almost double the amount for something for which a project should have been allocated in the first place. Double the amount is way beyond margin of error.
We've also seen some cancellation of some projects just because the issue has been raised. And then there's a cancellation of a certain project that was supposed to network all those health facilities so you can access all of them. So that contract has been cancelled. And now the CS for Health has been summoned to the Senate to go and explain why are you cancelling when we are in the middle of this.
But if you want to find what is interesting, right now, our railway, the parcel that deals with the railway, are now revamping old engines to try and ensure that the network of railway within the city, within this county, is actually working using the old railway. Now, don't you pause and ask and say, but excuse me.
If it could have been sorted out previously, why wasn't that an option before?
Because the rail network exists, by the way. It's not as though it didn't go anywhere. And it's not just within the county of Nairobi. Even the environs. If you go into Central, there was a rail network. There's a rail network all over the place going towards the senior. There's a rail network almost everywhere. Now, all it required was just reviving, not rebuilding. For local
attempts to revive this railway have, RVR, I don't know what. There have been many and far between. Let's take a short break. Open up the phone line 0719-012-600. City Muga is saying that our government has enslaved us. Pure and simple. Do you agree? Do you not agree? Good morning. 13 minutes to 7 o'clock.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
So this generation and the next couple of generations in Kenya will be slaves. Slaves enslaved by the government. that they have elected and chosen to lead them. That's what City Muga is saying. And basically, you're using this because you're saying our spiraling national debt is what is actually causing us to be enslaved. Because you've got to the government has got to raise taxes to pay back these debts to whoever has lent us. The person who's lent you a debt is called the debtor or creditor?
Well,
Creditor.
creditor.
His son was giving you the credit.
So to pay back our creditors. So this is where we are at.
You know, every time you think
I think you go a bit too harsh, though, on your issue of
what aspect of what I've said is harsh.
Characterizing this thing as enslavement and servitude, slavery and servitude.
What aspect is harsh, Eric?
The aspect of calling it slavery and servitude.
What would you call it?
Let me say that
It's
again,
national
just in
debts.
case you didn't get what I said. Forms of modern day slavery. Okay?
Yes.
And the most widespread form of slavery, when people borrow money they cannot repay and are required to work to pay off the debt, then losing control of the conditions of both their employment and the debt. Bonded labor or debt bondage. The most widespread form of slavery today.
People who cannot repay, we are repaying.
It's not the first. We're not the first country to have debt, of course, but also there's countries who are paying debts from generations. I'm just reading an article here, whereby the British Empire had to buy back their slaves, and they spent 40% of their budget, and 200 years later they were still paying for it. So taxpayers were actually buying slaves up to 2015, if we're speaking of slavery. I think the thing with our debt as Kenyans, of course, it's skyrocketed, and it's something that's in the papers and news every day. But I think given that it's being used for development, when it is being used for development, it's being channeled towards development, these projects will then pay for themselves by increasing the GDP, increasing socioeconomic activity around those infrastructure projects. So it's not something that our children will be paying for per se. And of course, there's also sort of tenures to these loans, whether 10 years or 25 years. In fact, we've been complaining that they're too short. So yes, we have to repay the loans, but I think the projects that are being built will help grow the economy enough to repay the loans and then further boost us as a country. Not in defense of the government, but I don't think we can go as far as saying we're slaves to the national debt. I personally don't think so.
Of these projects that are development oriented, mention three to me so that I understand. Because apart from the SGR and the road network that has been going on for the longest time.
Two of the three that are...
No, those are the ones I've mentioned, the ones I know. Tell me others.
SGR, road networks, right?
The ones I know of.
There's been rural-urban development, urban... What is it called? Rural electrification, rather, which will lead to rural development, which leads to more business enterprise and growth. Those are the three I was going to mention: rural electrification, road network, and SGR. And we'll see the benefits of those in years to come in terms of cities, or rather small towns, sprouting and economic activity and the GDP growing. It might take some time, as does, as is the case with infrastructure projects, but this is not something that our children will be paying for.
Our debt currently is at what, 6 trillion? So these projects that you mentioned absorbed 6 trillion Kenya shillings.
I mean, we're still, the way to look at it is not just debt. You don't speak of debt in isolation. I've said this before. It's like speaking of a mortgage and just talking about the amount that is owed. Of course, with a mortgage, you're gaining equity on that as well, but also you could be renting. So you've got to speak of debt in context. And the way we do this is with the debt to GDP ratio, which we're still well within.
No.
We left it a while ago.
We're at what? We're at 70%, which is IMF recommended still. No. We can have a look at the figures.
What does IMF recommend? 100%?
No. I mean, there's countries like Japan, and I'm not making that comparison. Japan is at the recommendation threshold. It depends on whether it's World Bank and so on. It's between 64 to 70%, of which we're still in. We're still well within our debt to GDP ratio. And usually it's a reflection of our ability to repay that loan. This is why you cannot look at debt in isolation. It's important. And this varies. I mean, some countries like Japan, who of course are very capable, and I'm not comparing our economies, but so we can understand what debt to GDP ratio means. Japan, I think, is at 294% of its into debt in terms of debt to GDP ratio. But of course, Japan is able to repay it. And also, if you look at the currency and so on, we've borrowed in dollars. All those things matter. It's a bit more complex than just stating that. But we cannot look at debt in isolation. We've got to understand that we need to borrow to develop, and the developments will actually pay back the loans, not individuals, not our children, so to speak.
But the children.
So I don't see where this slavery comes from.
City.
Also, if you look at the definition, if we're going to, he's philosophized the whole notion. If we're going to be literal about it, if you look at the definition of slavery, the fact that it's forced labor and so on, nobody's being forced to work here. You can decide not to.
But you'll still pay debt. You have to pay tax in some
through
form
consumer.
Consumer tax and everything else.
Through consumer tax, but you're not having to work. You're not being forced to work.
As long as you're alive in this country, you will pay debt. You will pay that tax.
You will pay the tax, but you're not being forced to work, which is part of the definition of slavery.
Is it?
If you look at the definition, the full definition of what slavery is, it involves work.
It involves you paying. That's the modern day slavery that Ndu has actually just read out to us. Yeah, he's talking about that. So if you've borrowed and you cannot pay,
they take your assets. The piper will come and sing his tune, and you will have to dance to the tune of the piper.
You are stuck to that.
It's interesting because the IMF estimates the ratio for Kenya at 59.9 for this year. The nation first breached the debt threshold in 2016 when it rose to 50.6 of the GDP amid increased borrowing to fund construction of projects such as railways and roads. Unfortunately.
So we passed our 52. 50
Yes.
what?
Right now it's 59.9.
Last
according
I
to the
saw,
IMF.
64 was
as
the
of October
recommended.
16th, 2019.
What's the
Okay, we can
recommended
look at
ratio?
Recommended ratio. I think it changes depending on the country's economy. Last
Yes.
I saw was 64%. Some were saying up to 70. We've got up to 70%. So if we're at 59, we're not doing too badly, if you ask me.
The reason why, one of the reasons why we were changing that threshold from just percentages to an actual figure was because we were seeing ourselves completely getting off the rails on this one. And so we said, oh, no, let's put a figure. Let's limit it
But
to
you
9
see,
trillion.
when you look at a figure on its own, you're then isolating this conversation about debt, and you're not talking about it in context. The reason you do the debt to GDP ratio is because it gives you an indication of your ability to repay that loan, which as a developing country is what you need to be looking at. Can we repay? And we could even borrow more if we could repay more. So I think it's important that we don't look at debt in isolation.
How should we look at it?
As I said, in context, we need to borrow, we need to develop. Are we able to repay? Will the developments repay? Or, we're not going to sit here and say, well, we don't want a high debt because we don't want to have to repay it. If we can repay it and develop, then why not? I mean, businesses do that all the time if it's going to make you money. Some people borrow money to make money.
But our problem hasn't been just that. We've been borrowing expensive money. IMF, World Bank lend money, but they give you conditions, but it's cheap money. They'll charge you something like 1%. But we've been borrowing from institutions that charge you a great deal of money. And we've had an appetite for going to these very same people when we've had other options. And I think we don't go to these options because we know those options will set conditions.
Yeah.
They'll tell you need to do A, B, C, D. The fellows who loan you, first of all, it's short term, and then it's expensive. So you have to keep
They're loan sharks.
Yes, they're essentially loan
Essentially.
sharks. So
On an international grand
Oh, yes.
international
so
scale.
essentially, the borrowing that causes a problem is not the borrowing for development, but the borrowing for repaying debt. That's where the problem comes in.
Well, really, you shouldn't be borrowing to repay debt.
But that's what we're doing.
For recurrent expenditure. And this is why I think maybe Punguza Mzigo wasn't such a bad idea, because our recurrent expenditure is very high. So maybe these are the things we need to look at if we're going to look at solutions, as opposed to saying, we're slaves and resigning ourselves to that, is maybe cutting down the wage bill, the national wage
This isn't a
bill.
situation which we are resigned to. It's just a reality. Remember, you say people don't have to work. Well, they also don't have to eat. They also don't have to breathe. You don't have to do anything, really. But human beings survive by doing certain things. Now, it's not that you just have to work, but you have to work with certain conditions. You have to work with monies that were originally paid lessening. You have to work because you walk to work because you can't afford public transport because fuel has gone up, fares have gone up, but you still have to work. You have to work because you have to survive.
Right. and you don't have enough money, then we see what has happened in the country over the last few weeks, where austerity measures then have been put in place. The judiciary, 50% of your working budget then is taken away from you. There's a delay in making sure that money gets to the county level and things like that. And we see that. You feel the pinch when it comes along, because it's clear that the money that would have been otherwise used for some of these things has been diverted because there's just not enough to go around. And it's unfortunate that these decisions were not made on a better round table in terms of, more people being either involved in the process or at least being very clear about where it is that the country wanted to go.
I think there was clarity when they borrowed, because you cannot get that money and if you don't justify what it is you need it for. My contention is that what it was intended for just didn't happen. That is why you are in the situation that you are in.
Maybe that's what happened, what it was intended for. What the creditor was told it was intended for is actually a different thing.
Right.
It was actually being borrowed to go wherever it went.
Yes.
You see? And our problem here is, fiscal management, basically. It's borrowing as a concept, not bad at all.
No.
Not wrong at all.
No.
However, the amount that we've borrowed as well, if you actually look at it on paper, we have borrowed for good things, for good projects.
On paper.
It's on paper. It's the fact that some unscrupulous officials here and there have gone ahead now to steal that money, to divert it from its proper use. That's where the problem is. So the government has not enslaved us. It's some thugs who have...
They work for the government, Eric.
And in terms of action, you see, the thing is here, because it is a thin line, but it needs to be exposed because of the fact that there are, unscrupulous individuals who basically take away this money, and the government, by not doing anything, continues to perpetuate the problem.
Eric, look at it this way. Huh? Take a family where someone, say, is employed but drinks all his money, all right? So children don't go to school, and what do they end up doing? They'll have, if they want to work, it'll be menial work, something that requires just your physical ability. Now, if they don't pull themselves out of it, what it means is that individual who had the ability has consigned his family and generations to come to a certain position in life.
Continue with this example when you come back. Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads. Good morning. It's 7 o'clock.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, things changing on Mombasa Road. It's the usual traffic that you see all the way from just before Cabanas, heading all the way down to around the Bellevue area. Bellevue now, from there, is flowing just a little bit, but is not so smooth all the way to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. That's probably going to pile up as we go through the minutes this morning. Thika Road, yes, has already started. The traffic today is all the way at Mwiki, and the question is, what is up? Well, there's a lot of traffic today. It's Monday morning, and people are doing what it is that they ended early on Friday and were not able to finish. All right, no traffic at the moment on Waiaki, where it's moving quite swiftly, so that is a good thing. On Jogo Road, trying to get into the city centre and accessing the City Stadium roundabout, not so bad today. Right now, it is looking very, very good. The accident that happened at the Pangani underpass leading to Wangari Maathai Road has still not been cleared up, and that is causing traffic because it's two-lane traffic now, and trying to get in and out is an absolute nightmare. Hopefully that will be taken care of soon, but if you're sitting in traffic, that is the reason why. Let's see what it looks like when we have some wet conditions in different parts of the city, but we'll see in a short while how we can get you moving this morning. Give us a call, send us a message, and we'll see how we can help.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Nyeri Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room.
You're a Kenyan. Do you believe what C.T. Muga, do you agree with what C.T. Muga is saying, that you have been enslaved by your government? And he says one of the rights guaranteed in the Constitution is a right to not be subjected to slavery or servitude. But because of our spiraling national debt, C.T. Muga this morning says that the government has actually just turned us into slaves. Why, C.T.?
This morning, I have been accused of philosophizing, and all I'm doing is actually stating facts, not philosophizing. Fact, we have borrowed more than we actually realistically ought to. 1. 2, the taxes in this country continue to increase. And in this country, no one can escape paying tax. It doesn't matter. It could be direct, indirect. Everyone pays tax.
3.
Many people who are in business are rethinking the business models they have. This is a polite way of saying many people are thinking of shutting down or moving their businesses elsewhere. Now, that is a reality that we have. And the reason is because, 1, it's the tax. 2, just the tax. And 3 is just the tax.
So let me open the phone line, 0719 012 600. That's 0719 012 600. You can also tag us on Twitter at SpiceFMKE via the hashtag The Situation Room, and comment on Facebook as well, SpiceFMKE. What do you think? Do you agree with C.T. Muga? Are we slaves or are we not?
Well, I think, because of the fact, we've got to look at it like this, and I think it's interesting because of the fact that slaves and slavery has such negative connotations because of what happened hundreds of years ago. You want to think that you want to liken it to whips and cages and all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, it just really means being confined in a particular place or in a particular situation that you really don't have any kind of choice over. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to debt, that is what you have. You really don't have any choice in this. The government has taken this money on your behalf for development projects, to pay back what was not used, etc., etc. You're not being whipped. You're not being confined in a cage, but you are stuck in terms of you're not going to be able to get out of this unless you pay back. Now, here is when collective responsibility is practiced in a lot of countries, as opposed to other times when it should be practiced. Because look, a few people make the decision about where to get this money from, but all of you as a country are going to pay together, and you will be taxed. It will be used for that. There will be austerity measures. Things will not be done, and people say, okay, really, how does it affect me then if the government has taken a loan? Well, there are roads that will not be sorted out because money would then have been used for something else. There are schools whose infrastructure would not have been developed properly because money has been diverted for something else. There are health systems that will not be improved on because money has been diverted for something else. That is how it continues to enslave and entrap you, apart from paying taxes, because apart from paying taxes, that's what I do anyway, normally. But there are other things that you will then continue to suffer for as a result of the fact that money has been diverted to pay back what it should have been developing with.
You see, Eric, you mentioned something about the Ministry of Health. It appears that money which had been set aside for the universal health care now has actually been taken away simply because of some of these anomalies you speak of, which means this UHC will remain a dream, not a reality. So what have you done? You've enslaved people to ill health, because this was supposed to pull people out of the situation that they are in. When, for instance, you do not have a laid down workable plan that guarantees that, say, the coffee and tea farmers are buffeted from the vagaries of climate change and what have you, what happens is that the very thing that they're supposed to do, 1, you'll find that you are earning less from that particular produce. 2, you'll actually guarantee that people who work in that particular sector will not just earn less, but many will actually lose their employment. Now, if you take that logic to any sector of government, look at even the government right now. Is the government employing more people? The answer is no. Are the private sector employing more people? The answer is
more
no.
people than when?
No, just employing more people.
In terms, because the government, with devolution, the government is employing a lot more people than previously. If there's 47 counties, if you look at all the MCAs and the staff that would work within that, the ministries as well, and following on down from that. So is the government employing more people compared to when?
Is the government as a policy, for instance, you compare to the previous year, the previous 10 years or 5 years ago. When did we have the devolved system? The devolved system, by its very nature, had to employ people. Okay, since they employed people, are they employing more people?
It's interesting because if you look at the Ministry of Education, just as an example, they went on this drive to employ 10,000 interns, as opposed to having people on any kind of permanent employment. And one of the reasons that they gave is because at that time they just could not afford it. Interestingly enough, in today's paper, we see that even those 10,000 interns that they wanted to hire, very few of them have turned up in terms of, even for the interview, talk less of them getting on board.
Remember,
and
it's
we
not the
have
government's
teachers,
job to employ
and we
people.
have teachers who are looking for jobs.
It's
they're
not the
not being
government's
employed.
job to employ people as such. It's the government's job to create a conducive business environment that will then create employment. So it's not their job to employ people per se. If anything, we want to be cutting the wage bill. That's what some of these popular initiative bills have been about. Punguza Mzigo, the wage bill, the recurrent expenditure is far too high. So we don't want our government spending money on actually paying personnel. If anything, if they could automate most things and release people, and that money could be used for something else. But yes, in terms of servicing our debt as Kenyans, I think we have hit a few hurdles, and now we're borrowing in order to repay.
These aren't hurdles in jail.
To repay. But there's something, I'm getting to something. We're borrowing to repay, which is outside the law. We're supposed to borrow for development. But I think if we give things time, I keep saying with infrastructure projects, mega infrastructure projects, and some of these have, we've opened up Northeastern, you've got LAPSET coming up and so on, but we've opened up Northeastern with a road infrastructure and road network there as well. And we will begin to feel the benefits of this, and the GDP will grow as a result. And the GDP, debt to GDP ratio has actually been higher in 2002, where it was at 78%. And when we talk about IMF recommendations, they were at 74%. We set ourselves that limit that you were talking about that we have breached of 59%. So I'm no economist. Things could be better, but I don't think we're slaves just yet. And we wouldn't be the first to be paying a debt from previous generational decisions and previous governments. I gave the example whereby people in the UK up to 2015 were still paying back money from 200 years ago that the government had borrowed to pay off for the slaves in the empire. So we're not the first.
Ndu,
Yes.
what's your position on this? So we've heard clearly Nyeri saying you're not the first.
Well, I think the danger lies in actually saying because we're not the first, or because it's not as bad, then we're just going to allow ourselves to maybe go down a slippery slope. But looking at the dangers and looking what could be pitfalls, and then saying, hey, let's put a rein on this before we actually go down this tunnel. And I think that's what we need to be looking at, and make sure that we don't go the downward way, regardless of the fact that we have 2, 3, 4 points to get to our threshold. We see the threshold. It's in sight. It doesn't mean we have to plummet through it just because it's available.
Well, I think the issue of calling it ourselves slaves just because we've been borrowing, yes, we've borrowed excessively, yes, but are we able to pay? Like you've described it, and as long as we are able to pay, we are paying, yes, we are having hurdles in repaying the loans, but we are repaying the loans. We are not slaves. Is our debt situation good? No, not at all. That's why we need to have a conversation about the National Treasury and the management of our financial
Some austerity
assets,
measures,
right?
yeah.
But we are not slaves. That's my position.
I think it's a good position, similar to one where you want to bury your head in the sand and believe that you're actually breathing fresh air. Carry on, bury your head in the sand and assume that everything is hanky-dory and that the economy of this country is actually lovely and it's actually doing very well. Carry on.
Well, the conversation continues on our social media pages, Spice FM KE on Facebook, as well as at Spice FM KE on Twitter. Good morning, 11 minutes past 7.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Broadcasting in Malindi on 97.7, Nyeri 90.9, 96.7 in Eldoret, 96.0 in Nakuru, Kisumu 102.5, Mombasa 87.9, and Nairobi 94.4. We live stream every morning on Facebook, Spice FM KE, on YouTube, as well as our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. My name is Eric Latif. We have CT Muga, Jerry Thorne, and Nduoko. Let's cross over the borders, shall we?
Right, take a look at what's happening in Tanzania right now. They just concluded local elections. And we had President John Magufuli say, you know what, this is great. We have elections that have been carried out. However, there were international observers who then made a few statements about how they felt that the elections that took place were not free and they were not fair and that they were not open in terms of transparency. And then Magufuli then set a warning and he said, look, according to him, and was setting this statement then for the media to understand very clearly, we don't want any mention of any kind of foreign observation. We don't want any kind of foreign statements concerning our elections or concerning our process in this country, and anybody then who did so would be bound legally in terms of then their freedoms. Now, this is just one example of how Magufuli has made certain statements in the past, and I'm saying that yes, in terms of democracy or in terms of making sure that your economy is robust and vibrant, in terms of making sure that your country is moving forward, there are certain freedoms then that you don't want to step on, and make sure that you still have things like freedom of the press or freedom of expression. That is absolutely necessary in a country. And unfortunately, we've seen very many cases when Magufuli is making sure that outside observation is not welcome whatsoever, and is actually then stepping on the toes of those within the country then who are mandated to share this information, i.e. the media. There have been very many cases since his election in 2017, and they've implemented laws that stifle independent journalism and restrict the activities of NGOs as well as opposition parties. In these just concluded elections, for example, the opposition refused completely to participate in these elections, citing some of these, for example, the stifling of opposition parties in the country. And I'm saying you cannot allow these things to go under the water. They cannot be then at the expense. It cannot be that they are thrown out the window because you're trying to move the country forward. It must be collective across the world. Regardless of where you are, trying to make sure that your country has developed properly does not mean that you should then stifle other freedoms when it comes to opposition, when it comes to development organizations, when it comes to the private sector, when it comes to media. And so for here, we see that unfortunately, Magufuli is being a bit thin-skinned and is not ready to take any kind of criticism, and that is not going to help when it comes to the development of this country. He's taken quite a hard stance from the very beginning when he entered into government and when he entered into the presidency. But we have seen also at the same time that there's been a lot of pressing down of freedoms, and that cannot be the case, because if you're going to be moving forward, it needs to be done collectively. Yes, so there have been many, many expressions over the last 4 years since he's been in government. And we see that, yes, there have been many things that he's been done, which should be loudly applauded in terms of development for the country, in terms of making sure that the people of Tanzania then enjoy positive development, progressive development, as it were. But at the same time, we see very many things happening that many have frowned on. And the people of Tanzania themselves see that, you know, this is great that this is happening in our country in terms of development, but our freedoms are not, we are not able to express ourselves, whether it is through the media. The opposition parties definitely are not even allowed to speak. And then we have several edicts that come about. We've had journalists that have been detained for months in Tanzania. Tanzanian nationals being detained, and they're not able to speak. Here, you're not even able to say anything about what foreign governments or what their sentiments may be about local elections that were held. So I think there's a lot that has been done, but there are many different things that could then be seen as stifling democracy. And I'm saying, look, there has to be a balance.
Well, democracy, like Nyeri says every time, maybe that's not the time for democracy. And the people of Tanzania seem to agree, some of them, apart from those, of course, in the opposition, who would like to have the opportunity themselves to do exactly what Magufuli is doing.
I think the reason it stands out, of course, is when you take a step backwards, because they did have an element of freedom of speech and quite a bit of democracy under the previous leader. What Magufuli is doing is quashing all dissent, of course, and he's not the first African leader to do that. They've usually been referred to as dictators. I think this has a negative connotation, but sometimes it can work. You find, for instance, in Rwanda, Kagame is quite similar in terms of ensuring, the media houses are very well contained by the state for reasons such as, we don't want to discuss the genocide, or we don't want to, you cannot have certain conversations as well. Of course, any opposition, and even quite recently, you'll see people being jailed. There was a lady in Rwanda, of course, that a lot of people were advocating for. You get Amnesty International and all these donors and international agencies stepping in. But you really must understand, I think, the context. It took Europe or the West a long time to get to where they are with the freedoms that they have and the democracy they have and the economic growth they have. So again, we find ourselves at this place where we're debating between development and democracy. And I think what Magufuli is doing is saying we're going for development, because dictatorships breed development because of it's efficient and straightforward decision making. This is what he's trying to do. He doesn't want any opposition, and he's managed to quash that quite well. It's also a good breeding ground for personal discipline and order. This is dictatorships again, and you can see that with Magufuli. I've talked about the difference between institutionalized leadership and personalized leadership. And with Magufuli, we've seen that it's more personalized leadership. With democracy, it's a matter of building up institutions and building trust and confidence around those, which he's not trying to do.
Right, and I think we should then call it a different system of government. Every time we talk about, democracy, we say we're fighting for democracy, or we have entrenched democracy as a mode of government in different countries. Don't call it that. We need to then say, we're not going to call it anything for now.
But
because
it's not
if you
democracy.
call it, Tanzania has said very many times.
But it's Tanzania's
No,
model of democracy.
that's PR. No, we keep saying this model of democracy.
Yes.
There's a few basic tenets of democracy.
No.
And one of
One
them
includes freedom of speech. These civil rights must be
Actually,
protected.
and that's what I'm saying. They're being quashed in Tanzania.
Then it is
so
no
why are we
longer
calling
democracy.
It is
We
not
need
democracy.
to
Call it something
Call
else.
it something else.
No.
It's not.
The minute dissent is being
Western-style democracy is what we discuss here. And even at that, the truth of the matter is that even in the West, it differs.
Yes.
In
there
this
are
so-called
still
West, it
basic
differs.
principles
From
of
country to
democracy
country.
which, if compromised, will be undemocratic.
Now, which
So we
ones are
stop
those?
calling. So, for instance, things like choice. Yes,
People
things
have a
like
choice. There's an
absolutely. You
election.
should. You
Freedom
should,
of expression.
Freedom of expression is one of them. The idea of an opposition is one of them. There's quite a few tenets we can go into.
The freedom
but the
is
minute
there.
you
What do you
start
do is
compromising those, it stops being democracy, which is fine. But we can't say, that's Western style. This is our style. No, this is no longer democracy. This is a form of authoritarianism, paternalism. Call it something else, but it is not democracy.
You are aware that every time you use these terms, you're using the Western terminology that describes these particular institutions.
Yes.
Yes. And
We're
if
speaking English, though. So
I
I'm going to use
I
terminology.
thought that's what I was
Okay.
doing. I was speaking in English.
Okay, so what would you term it?
I wouldn't term it anything like you are. What I would do is try and understand what it is they're trying to put in place and then find a term for it.
But within a schema, there's a conceptual framework there already where we discuss democracies.
But Tanzania has an opposition.
Which
Does
is-
it not?
And according to the
Tanzania has an opposition.
Has an opposition according to the Tanzanian opposition, and they've been very clear about this because of the fact that in so many instances their voice has been shut down. They've not been allowed to operate in terms of what they call a dictatorship that has come out of the hands of Magufuli.
Not being
then
allowed
they're
to operate.
useless.
What does that mean? Not being allowed to operate.
well,
they still have their headquarters.
yes,
their leadership is not in jail, right? The Chadema and all the other opposition
you can create
parties.
such a
they're
hostile
all there.
environment.
For example,
they're operating.
You can marginalize dissent. You can create a hostile environment. You can be threatening. You can make sure. Well, I mean, by the time you're telling people not to discuss certain issues, you can instill fear, and we know what Magufuli
Have
is
they
like.
stopped discussing those issues?
Well, interestingly, one of the ways in which these discussions take place is through the media. And there was an edict that was given over the weekend that has come out of the government and have said, look, we will not have the discussion taking place.
Which one?
We have
What discussion?
this discussion about the fact that the recently held elections in the country were done in a non-transparent, were carried out in a non-transparent manner. And this is coming from the opposition, number one. It's coming from Western observers, and it's also coming from Western media, as well as local media. And it came out very clearly. The spokesperson of government, as well as Magufuli himself, said, we will not be having this conversation. And they've actually gone ahead to arrest a number of journalists in the country because of this. Do not speak. You speak about it, we arrest you. And that is what has happened. Clear. Fact.
Do you remember how we were all waxing
That one.
lyrical about Magufuli when he came in, and he's sort of clamped down on corruption, and we Kenyans were saying we should be like that.
Were we?
And absolutely, yes. If you were on social media discussions, that was the conversation. A lot of people were very excited about it.
About Magufuli?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I think his style of... yes.
I still am.
His style of leadership and so on. Well, here we are. This is what it leads to. This is personalized governance over institutionalized governance. This is, and I talked about this last week, in terms of investor confidence. He'll be hard pressed to find people wanting to go in there, because they've seen that he can make these roadside decrees at his whim. And that could affect businesses very adversely.
Well, and interesting
if they're
enough
not
that you
following
say
the
that.
law.
No, hold on. Interesting that you've said that, Nyeri, because of the quashing of civil liberties, you've had the IMF, for example, they've withdrawn their aid from Tanzania in the last 1 year alone. And I've said, because of the squashing of civil liberties that we have seen take place over time, that kind of aid has been withdrawn. And these are apart from just the IMF, you have quite substantial, what can I call them, economic organizations who have also said, look, because of what we see, we're not going to actually give our aid. And they've actually withdrawn, something upon which Tanzania had relied on previously. And you can see this as a direct result of some of these decrees that have been put out there.
Well, it's not the first time that the West has arm twisted developing countries, or at the time they're called third world countries, to push them to a regime that suits them. If you remember, the agitation for multi-party democracy came from the West into Kenya. And we were warned, and rightly so, that these would be tribal parties. And here we find ourselves having to rethink and reimagine our country because of these very pressures. So when the IMF steps in and starts putting, I think, the equivalent of sanctions, and we've seen that, sanctions, whether from days of Cuba right through to the Middle East at some point, when the West wants something, this is what they do. Of course, now we're lucky enough because China has opened up its doors, and we can leverage and we can turn to the East. Previously, we were handcuffed to the West, and we had to listen to them. So as they arm twist Tanzania, I think Tanzania could look east and speak to China. Of course, Tanzania has very heavy ties with South Africa as well. I think Russia will be one of the key players as well. So I don't think the West can have much influence, especially when it comes to internal policy. You've seen the step back from Kagame, they step back from Ethiopia, because China, with its policy and non-interference policy, will still loan money, will still give, whether it's aid or whatever it is we need, without interfering. So I think we have options now. We don't have to listen to the West. And I don't think this is the wrong way to go. I criticize it in as far as trying to fit it into democracy. I criticize that it's not democracy, but I have no problem with what I would call paternalism in Africa. I don't want to call it dictatorship because it conjures up very negative feelings and sentiments. We've seen African dictators and despots, and it's left us, the remnants of that have left a bad taste in our mouth. So if you call it paternalism, and I keep giving the example of Singapore, I've given an example of, if you look at the development, economic development, i.e. GDP and so forth, if you look at Rwanda and you look at Ethiopia, for instance, these countries have very little resistance. They have a lot of social order. And of course, also, I think a dictatorship, I think he's incentivized to make sure that intergroup inequality is actually sorted out, so you don't have a revolt against him. You can look at this through many lenses. But yes, we don't need democracy until we're developed. So it's not that I don't have a problem with Magufuli as such, but in terms of the ideology that he's following, I don't think he's on the wrong path.
So the elections that were held last week in Tanzania were for local level.
Yeah, there were local elections.
Street and village elders.
There were local elections, yeah.
And the opposition parties decided to boycott the election, right? And they cited various other things. For example, saying that they feel intimidated, that their candidates are intimidated. They feel like it's not going to be free and fair. And of course, the ruling party's candidates participated. And of course, CCM won 99% of the seats.
99.9% actually.
It's
Yes.
just because the opposition decided to boycott the election. Have we seen any breakdown of law and order in Tanzania? We haven't. Have we seen any kind of, mass arrests of people? Can we talk about any of these candidates have been arrested? Are they in jail? Any of the candidates that could have participated across the country? They haven't been arrested. They decided because of one or two issues that they disagree with the president that they're not going to participate in an election.
But neither can you tell would it have happened if they did participate. You can't tell that. You can't tell.
Well, by the
So,
time,
I mean,
by the time,
you
by
can't
the
use
time
that as a
they're
basis for
boycotting-
argument
If you
because
have
you
an
can't tell.
election and you decide to boycott, well, then you have to live with the consequences.
Yeah, it's you who decided. You can't tell me that, we have boycotted because half our candidates are in jail. No. They basically just picked a couple of issues here and there.
They didn't boycott
And
because there were no
and I
individuals to
also
participate.
I also see this as a campaign tool by the opposition as well. For us to actually emerge as one strong force, we boycott national elections at this particular stage, and then we have a conversation. So everybody's not talking about, this election is not credible.
Then why
It's
not allow
free and
people to
fair.
express their feelings about it? Why
They
not
have
allow
been
people?
allowed to
no.
express-
There's been a gag on this. It's clear. Come on, it was an edict that was given over the weekend.
That
It
was?
is clear that journalists in the country will not report on this. Will not report about any kind of election malpractice or non-transparency. There's a gag. It's there. So
They
I
will
mean,
not
why not
quote
allow
foreign
yes,
media?
They will
They
not
will
quote
not
foreign.
quote-
So
That
why
is the
not?
thing.
Why not
Don't
allow
quote
if it is?
I'm quoting Al Jazeera here, which is calling the Tanzanian president draconian and all. I mean, come on, really.
It is draconian. It is backward. This move. It's
Strong-
a step in the wrong direction.
Strongman President John Magufuli. Strongman President John Magufuli.
What would you prefer that he be called? Weakling?
President John Magufuli. He's just a president.
I think the reason why Tanzania is standing out, because there's a lot of dictatorship around, and it's done a lot. Of course, China is one of them. We had Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, amongst others, Malaysia as well. The Asian tigers rose up because this was one of their ideologies, or it worked well for them. But with Magufuli is because he's taking a step back. So people have enjoyed the freedoms. It becomes very difficult to then renege that contract with society. Once you've given them a freedom, to take it away, you will see some backlash.
Would you say the
of
president of
sorts.
South Africa is a dictator?
No.
Why?
I mean, if you're going to broaden the idea of or the definition of a dictator so as to fit anybody in, no. But I think the fact that there's freedom of speech, media is pretty free. You can dissent. There's laws, and laws are created within a framework. The constitution is followed. You can actually criticize the government. So no,
But
I
can the
don't
opposition pass any law? ANC can do precisely what they like.
In that
tyranny
parliament.
of numbers.
Anything, yes. So if they happen to be accommodating and allow anything to happen, it's
No,
because they
but
know
civil liberties are always protected. This is Voltaire's sort of tyranny of numbers. This is where that phrase comes from before our good Mutai Ngunyi made it popular. Tyranny of numbers. You have civil liberties to protect you from the tyranny of numbers. So the minute those civil liberties are removed in a democracy, then you have a dictatorship, and they can do anything. So the majority can decide, let's kill all the people who have grey hairs, for instance. But because civil liberties protect you from this, that doesn't happen. Now, what seems to be happening in Magufuli's country is the civil liberties are being removed.
removed
No.
or curtailed.
They're not being, they're being curtailed. Basically, we're just conditioning them. These kind of civil liberties are running amok.
Well, once you can't express yourself,
No, you can. You can express yourself, but
Using
there'll be
only
consequences.
certain words, you
Oh,
express
no.
yourself, and there will be consequences if you do.
There are consequences everywhere.
Everywhere, in every country. It's 7:30. Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads, and then we come back, and Nduoko will come back and tell us how many people actually, what was the voter turnout in that election that opposition parties boycotted.
And maybe you can find out information and tell us.
6.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Traffic.
All right, with the rains come poor roads, unfortunately, and there are sections of Limuru Road that need to be worked on, and this is causing some traffic this morning. On Limuru Road, it's not quite a pretty situation to get into the city or leave the city either. Mombasa Road, jam has started all the way from Syokimau. It's not going to be easy to get out of there. And there's, of course, Ngong Road today, trying to get into the city centre. We are not able to do that as smoothly as we would like to because the traffic had started to build up from 5:30 this morning. Bagavi Way from Langata Road and to Langat and to and from Langata Road is busy, but it is moving this morning. Getting off of Thika Road will be a bit of a problem today. We have traffic all the way as far back as Mwiki, but now at the roundabout of the 44 junction. So it's quite far back this morning. We had some fog on Wayaki Way today, trying to get down. So please do be careful as you do that. Let's see what it looks like later on. But for now, it's a typical Monday morning. Nothing terribly out of order, but we will see as the minutes tick by. You see something that we should know about, do let us know. 0719012600 is the number to call.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
So the US, the UK and other countries have expressed concern over the legitimacy of Tanzania's landslide local elections that saw President John Magufuli's ruling CCM party win 99% of the available seats across the country.
How many people actually voted?
Participated in the election. Let's find that out as we go along in this conversation. So opposition parties decided to boycott this election.
And he's facing criticism, don't get me wrong, for cracking down on the opposition and the press. But you'll find a majority of Tanzanians are quite happy with the progress and they're receiving services. They feel their lives have improved since Magufuli was sworn in. So that begs the question, do we need this democracy or do we need to get to a level of development where people are getting service provision, at least the very basics, before we turn and try and democratize?
Are we saying then that to instill development, because it's clear, if we're saying the people of Tanzania are happy, to instill development, then you need a certain level of dictatorship to have that done?
I think to a certain element, yes. I think we saw that with a lot of, I say the Asian tigers, that level of governance. You want to be able to do things without facing the opposition that you face, without having to go through the debates that you do, without, the constant electioneering cycles that are interruptive to the continuity which is needed in development. You want the social discipline that actually comes with the dictatorship. So for me, I've always argued that. And of course, the cost of democracy itself, all that money could actually be going into development. So for me, yeah, I think you need to reach certain economic development before actually looking to democratize. And we're seeing that with Magufuli, where he's having to clamp down on core ideals of development. He's having to curtail those rights. But the feedback is mixed. People are saying their lives have never been better.
People are happy in Tanzania. People participated in this. Even those the opposition candidates who boycotted, we haven't seen them organizing. They're also happy. They're okay. We haven't seen them going on the streets and demonstrating and saying, you know what?
Well, maybe they can't go on the streets.
Maybe they can't because they would be arrested.
Let me ask the question.
Let's see them going on the streets and getting arrested.
Right now, around the world, there are demonstrations. Every corner of the world you think all of them have been allowed?
Oh, of course
people
not.
don't need permission to actually demonstrate. They will express themselves.
They will express themselves when they get to the
If
point whereby they
angry,
feel that, yes, when they get to the point where they feel they cannot take it anymore is when you will see an eruption. But for now, maybe they feel, okay,
they're happy.
Yeah, for now, I don't know if happy is the sentiment that I would, or the adjective that I would use, but they're okay with the way things are. If it gets to the point of uncomfortability, then you will see somebody doing something about it. And when they get to the point when they're angry enough, or where they see that these civil liberties are being squashed, or where they feel that, okay, that's great, you can do this, however, there are people involved. When they get to that point, you might see a different situation because, I mean, the example that CT gave around the world, whether you go to Chile, Lebanon, Egypt, wherever it is that you want to go, it got to boiling point and it spilled over. This is the time perhaps where Tanzanians are actually, this is different because we have somebody who is saying we certain things need to be done in order for us to enjoy this development. When it goes beyond development now and when it becomes now malevolent dictatorship, that is something totally different.
Some of these guys who are boycotting the election had been barred from participating, not because, they were bad people, but just how they were filling their papers. spelling mistakes and other errors on official forms.
That's the reason why the opposition could not participate in the election.
That's how they were getting
the
bad.
opposition boycotted, surely.
They didn't just boycott because they woke up that morning and decided that, okay, we're just not going to participate. Obviously, there's sentiment that this action is being backed.
I'm not saying they didn't have a reason. I am saying they boycotted.
They did decide to boycott.
Yes, and once you boycott, there are consequences to boycotting. It doesn't matter how good or bad your reasons are, but you didn't participate.
You didn't participate, but also the importance of the reason.
Among the reasons,
is
the main reason was the feeling that their candidates were being disqualified from local elections. Minister of State Selemani Jaffo had said that leniency would be shown to allow previously barred candidates to stand. So initially that complained we're not being allowed to stand, and then all right, so let's look at some of these reasons. It's what the law says, how you should fill out your form, but okay, we'll allow you
Look at
guys
another
to
country in the region where an election...
Let me finish this. A number had been told that they would not be allowed to take part due to spelling mistakes and other errors on official forms. You have not filled your name correctly. Surely, how do you...
Now,
what do you want us to do?
I wouldn't have a problem with that if Magufuli let the West report that
and
was transparent and open about that.
But it was reported before.
No. Now what's happening is Magufuli has issued directives that we cannot quote Western media, we being Tanzanians, we cannot quote Western media when it comes to their... I think they were the ones who were talking about the fact that these elections weren't
not
free and fair.
transparent. Yes,
Absolutely. So you're not allowed to quote Western media. So you know that there's something wrong. I think he's balancing this act between, painting a picture that he is democratic so that his, he stays pally with the West who give him the money and the aid, whilst actually realizing that in order to reach economic development, and we've seen it across the world from the 70s with Brazil, growing rapidly economically under military rule. You've seen the economic tigers in the 80s. You've seen Singapore in the 90s, rather China in the 90s and so on. So he wants to grow his country, but he's still got to sort of pay lip service to the West because he still needs them clearly. And this is why he doesn't want the news coming out that it was not a free and
He's
fair
okay
election.
with the news coming out.
He's not.
He has not.
No, he's not.
This is what Ndu is pegging.
This is the fact.
Let me ask
that
you.
he doesn't want any of these
He
sentiments to come out.
He's saying local journalists, you don't have to quote Western media. Has he kicked out the Western media from the Tanzania?
He is telling them do not quote. Not you don't have to quote.
Yes.
It's not
So
an option.
Western
He's
media
telling
like
them,
Al
do not
Jazeera
quote.
can go ahead and report in their own countries. It's okay for the West to report in the West. But you're actually based in Tanzania. They haven't been kicked out of Tanzania, have they? No, they haven't.
I didn't talk about that at all.
Exactly.
I'm saying...
So media has not been gagged. The Western media has not been
No,
told,
he's
don't come to the
come
country
down.
and
No.
report.
You don't
He's
have to
basically
go
just
that
saying-
far. You can also make sure it's a hostile environment and you don't facilitate their stay in your country. You don't have to say,
And they
we've
haven't
gagged you.
written
We
to
don't know
complain.
that. It's something that a system would do. The state machinery would
The
do that.
Western media
if-
haven't written to complain that they have been gagged.
Who should they write to? You, Eric?
In their own country, in their own publications.
Who should they
Okay,
write
in
to?
their
Well,
own
maybe they don't
publications,
feel the
but
need
their
to report
audiences
that.
Have they complained?
If they don't feel a need to complain, it's because
Have they
there's nothing
complained?
to
What the
complain
Western
about.
media has done is report
No,
that there were
because-
irregularities in the elections.
Yes.
But have
They
they
have
complained?
they have also done stories talking about this edict that was given by the president.
Precisely.
Exactly.
But
so they've
have
talked
they-
about
Yes.
it has come through as a
Yes.
complaint in the story.
Yes, but have they been gagged?
That's why
When
they're
in
not
the
being
country?
gagged. They have not been gagged.
What do you want them to wear? A muzzle? You want them to put a muzzle on the journalists?
To be unable
come
to
on,
report.
no.
Yes.
To be gagged is to be
see,
unable
what
to
you're
report.
I'm
saying
sure
is,
there's
out of the
information
country.
that is being withheld. If you're seeing Magufuli,
No,
this
we
is
don't
his
know
sentiment.
that. We
of
don't
course,
know
this
that.
is the case. Some things,
How do you
are
know it's
common
the case?
sense. Because if Magufuli does not want Western media stories coming out, then he's not going to be free and transparent with all the information. You don't have to gag somebody for them not to report correctly.
By the
You
time
can
you're saying
refuse
that
to give
something should not be,
information.
by the time you're saying something should not be reported, there's obviously information that you don't want to get out. That's
and
clear.
you will withhold information. So make it very difficult and make it very hostile an environment for external news agents. There's no doubt about that. That goes without saying. Common sense follows. If you don't want people
Common
reporting
sense follows.
something,
Common sense
All right.
follows.
So,
Agreed.
okay, let me ask the question. When we had the ICC cases and the ICC complained that the Kenyan government was not being cooperative, what are we supposed to read into that?
well, I mean that's subjective. You can read into it.
No, this one is subjective.
What you want.
This one is subjective.
what
And
did
what
common
What
sense
did you
state
read?
in
What
that
did you
sense?
read into that?
I didn't
Siti?
need to read. They actually stated categorically that when they came into the country and they specifically asked for certain things they were not given. There's some information they wanted, they were not given. That was the definition of not being cooperative. Now, you have a situation where the Western media is reporting. Now, they're reporting about Tanzania, which means they have people who are getting the information from Tanzania. All right? And then you're talking about there being a hindrance, and I'm wondering, where is the hindrance and we're getting the information?
The president of Tanzania,
Are we getting all the information?
The president of
That is the
Tanzania
question.
did not want local journalists to
quote Western
media of information that was being fed to the people of Tanzania.
And I can see the reason for that. It's logical. I mean, why are we quoting Western? You're here yourself. Why are you quoting Western media? Report what you can see locally. Have they been told do not report what you can see locally?
These
No,
are
they
the
haven't been told
observers.
that.
We're talking about the observers,
Media.
the people who came to observe. They're the ones reporting to the Western media that the elections weren't free and fair.
And that's fine.
Now-
Observers, you said?
They were.
International
Yes,
observers.
they were.
The same
Yes.
sort of observers who've come to Kenya during our elections. These fellows who get it completely wrong, literally all the
The
time.
UK
Which there's
and
no
US.
problem. They might get it wrong, but nobody's stopping the press from reporting. Nobody's asking the press not to quote anybody.
Exactly.
We sit back and we watch. I mean, I have very little respect for Western observers. They themselves, their elections are flawed, if you ask me. But the fact that the media is not free in Tanzania to report this, who knows? They might be reporting that the observers have been biased.
Has the media been told do not quote Western observers, or has the media been told you don't need to quote Western media? You see, those are two different things.
Don't quote Western media on this with reports from Western observers. So it's the same thing that you're talking about. This is what
Western
actually came out. We're not talking about
observers.
we're not talking about speculation or somebody
Yes,
guessing. It
but
was
we're
clear
asking
what
for
was
the
said.
specifics.
This
That's
issue
what I'm giving you.
This issue that we're discussing, the gentleman in South Africa called Malema, he has had live altercations with Western media individuals on this very same sort of issue. When someone asks him a question, he asks, what on earth do you think you're asking me? Where has that come from? If someone has an issue with Western media, it's an issue with Western media.
Yes.
And what I ought to be asking is, what issue does he have with Western media? What is it about the reporting? that is
But
the
it's
problem?
interesting that we
Magufuli
say
is
this
well
because we
known for having
also.
curtailed
It's
his
interesting we say
freedoms.
this because also, apart from just Western, we've had even as far back as July, August, September, where local reporters have been arrested because of what they report about the police. What has been happening in terms of extrajudicial killings in Tanzania?
How many have been arrested?
Well, I'm talking. It's one case that we have coming from the CBJ.
One.
One case that we have that I'm giving an example of. Okay, that I'm giving an example of. We don't know how many more.
But we've had journalists arrested in Kenya.
In terms of the curtailing of media in Tanzania, it is an issue. It is an issue that cannot be ignored. It is clear. It is something that is happening. And to even have media
African
watchdogs
observers
that
said?
Eric knows about
What have the
that have
African
actually
observers
gone
said?
to Tanzania to find out what is happening. And two of them, one Kenyan and one South African, who were arrested last week.
Okay. They were arrested.
When they came in to ask what the situation was with the arrest of local journalists in Tanzania.
Since we are
Now, when they came in, no, we're not speculating. This is in fact,
Yes,
they
the
were
arrest,
arrested.
I understand. Why
because
were they arrested?
They came in the country and they were asking questions about
They were
local,
demanding the release of
demanding the
people who've been
release
arrested.
of
Oh, they
local.
were demanding the release.
Hold on.
Aha.
They wanted to find out where these journalists were and under which conditions they were arrested. With asking those questions, they were then arrested. This has nothing to do even with the local election story. This is another
So in total,
different
how many
It's
journalists
come
have been
under,
arrested?
no, it's come under fire for its deteriorating human rights record. There's no doubt about that. But what I wanted to remind us of, you were asking when we were waxing lyrical about Magufuli. There was a hashtag that was trending when he first came on in, I think, 2015, 2016, where they said, we Kenyans were saying, what would Magufuli do? Do you remember that? And we're all very excited. So there you have it.
I wasn't.
Here is personalized governance, and what we have in Kenya is institutionalized governance. That's the difference.
Is that it?
Absolutely.
We have institutionalized governance in Tanzania. Elections have been held not by Magufuli holding an election and counting the votes, but institutions actually conducting an election. Opposition has decided to boycott. We saw an opposition boycott an election right here in Kenya.
Yeah, and what happened? BBI.
Yep.
He's been called a rogue president by
Let me open
by
up the phone
West.
lines.
By Western media, of course.
0719 012 600. That's 0719 012 600. Join in this conversation. It's a 7:45.
96.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Absolutely. I want to remind us of an incident. We call it authoritarian populism, where he likes to fire people in front of an audience. If you remember back in November last year, so sort of this time last year, he fired an official for not remembering certain figures in a budget. And when one of the officials, actually he fired two in public, and one of them rebutted and said, "You can't expect me to remember every figure." His response was, "You can't talk to me like that." So he enjoys this, and he gets a lot of applause from his audience, who are, of course, people who are frustrated at the system, the masses and so on, who would be victims perhaps of unemployment and injustices, inequalities within the country. So they like to see senior officials or public officials being fired, and he's using this authoritarian populism. Now, that is not particularly democratic. It's not institutionalized. There's ways to fire people through an institution. The right to a fair trial, CT highlighted, is non-restrictive. It is an absolute right.
Let's hear from
he's
William.
curtailing that.
William, good morning.
Yeah, morning, Eric. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you. Can you greet the team for me?
Yeah, we can greet you too. Morning, William. How are you?
Good morning.
I'm fine, but I'm really disappointed with the ladies today. You know, the way you are attacking the issues of Magufuli's leadership. Yeah? You are attacking when the issue already Magufuli has already made some headways on it. First of all, you need to ask yourself one question: how did Magufuli become a leader in Tanzania? You know, the previous leader didn't want Magufuli to ascend into leadership. That's Jakaya Kikwete. Jakaya Kikwete wanted the weekend CCM so that Lowassa, who used to be his prime minister and who used to be involved in most of the grand national corruptions in Tanzania, to be his leader. I'm telling you, serious. You guys just do your research. I'm not saying something which I'm collecting out of the blues. You just do your research. How did Lowassa become a billionaire in Tanzania? Yet Tanzania has a system whereby for you to become that rich guy, there are some certain aspects of the national issues you need to meet. Lowassa became a billionaire through tendering most of government.
So you like what Magufuli is doing, in short?
First of all, Jerry, I have a problem with the word you're using, that Kenya will have institutionalized government and Magufuli is personalizing the government. No. Magufuli is just acting as from public outcry.
Yep.
Which is personalized. It's called
tip of the spear of an institution.
Authoritarian populism. That's what it's called. Which is personalized governance. But what I'm asking is, you like what Magufuli is doing?
I like what Magufuli is doing.
So you like dictators, you like benevolent dictatorship.
No, it's not dictators.
Careful, William, careful.
He likes what Magufuli is doing, and he thinks that Magufuli is democratic, right, William?
No, Eric, Magufuli used to be the Minister of Roads. True or false?
Yes, he did.
When you used to go, when the national budget has allocated the money for the roads in the interior, you know Tanzania is huge.
Massive.
So for you to know that if a road is constructed, is the public who will tell you that this road is constructed, you normally carry an audit after the road has been done. True or false?
Yeah,
True.
As a government official, servant. So you used to go there. Money used to be allocated to road construction. He was there. 8 months down the line, there's no work which has happened. So whom does he ask? He asks the public, then he goes back to the offices of the RDCs and the local commissioners there. Unajua Tanzania kuna majimbo na kuna wilaya. Sasa nenda nauliza viongozi wa majimbo na wilaya, pesa ilikuja ya hii kitu, wanaambiwa ilikuja. Mbona mjaza barabara? Contractor ako hivi, contractor ako hivi.
Okay. So what, according to you, what is happening in Tanzania now and the way in which Magufuli is running the government is satisfying? It's acceptable.
Okay, no.
Yes or no?
Okay.
Yes or no, William?
Yes, it's satisfying.
Is it democratic?
is very democratic because he's fighting the cartels who have been running down the Tanzanian development.
In a democratic
William.
way. Okay.
Yeah, go on. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Eric, and the entire team.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I think also I agree with what William is saying. Magufuli is doing fantastic work in Tanzania. Yes.
We
Because
don't
when
doubt
you
that.
have- When you have a leader who is authoritative to those who are in leadership so that they can deliver the work to the 190, that is good. Because I've been following, I think people of Tanzania are voting for CCM and the Magufuli leaders are related to Magufuli because of the work being done at the ground level. This is a person who can summon if he visits even up to the ward level and he can ask the as William has said, the RBCs, the MCS, they call them Madiwane. And you can hear him asking why we have put the money in this project and the project is stalled. What is the reason? Can you get the person, arrest him, charge him? So statistically, Magufuli is doing great work in Tanzania. For Chadema to boycott the elections, they were boycotting because they had already lost it.
They knew they were losing.
Yes, the way our opposers in Kenya were boycotted because they knew that they were not winning anything.
Ooh. Do you think such a thing needs to happen in Kenya then, this style of leadership? If it would happen in Kenya, do you think we would see a change in the way things operate?
Yes, if, for example, our President Uhuru could be supervising the Jubilee MPs, those who are of the party, and even the governors who are in Jubilee, we could be having a lot of work in counties going on. But right now, you see, these governors come in, open a polytechnic, put money, the project is stalled, nothing is going on. Because the president doesn't know what's in the ground. He sends the ministers who are politicians.
So Magufuli is just a man in touch with the ground.
Yes, that is a person who is selfly managing the country. He doesn't rely on the minister.
Does he
Thank you,
uphold the
Egon.
tenets of democracy, Egon?
Pardon?
Does he uphold democracy, the ideals of democracy?
I don't think there is any way that someone can undermine the democracy by asking or ensuring that the leaders are those who are given the roles to deliver.
What about by actually quashing dissent and ensuring or putting a cap on media freedom and expression?
By him saying that the media should not quote the other international media, so the local media not quoting the others, is right. Because, for example, how could Standard government relay the information from BBC?
Quoting BBC.
Should they not be able to do so if they want to?
The only thing they should do is by quoting sports, because the sports of like Arsenal not in Kenya.
Thank you, Yagan. Thank you. 0719-012-600. Join in this conversation on whether you agree with Nduoko, where she says that the route that John Pombe Magufuli has taken in Tanzania is basically just taking democracy down the wrong road.
Does Tanzania have human rights groups?
They do.
Why is it then that it's only Amnesty International and international rights groups complaining?
He's probably managed to gag these human rights groups, or they're in
So
his
that's the
pocket,
answer to
absolutely.
everything.
No,
Everything you
this
ask,
is how
he
a
has done this, he has done this.
Listen, I'm well versed with the workings of a dictatorship
But
state
we
and the
have
machination
situations
behind
in
it.
this country
So this is
where-
how it would work. So you'd
No.
have apparent or supposed NGOs, but they're all under the president in terms of their agenda. They're not going to go against him. This is how a dictatorship would work.
What is Tanzania's media actually reporting about the election? Before, during, and after the election? What have they been saying?
Well, they actually did say, I mean, over from Mwananchi to Citizen to Watetezi TV have been talking about the fact, well, according to them, that the elections were not free, were not fair, that there were incidences of non-transparency, according to them, concerning these local
where's
elections.
the gag?
So there's no gag.
This was before the gag. That's what I'm saying.
Why are you guys
This
in
was
denial?
before the
This
gag.
is Magufuli.
No, but-
This was when? This was
Actually,
last
no.
week.
This was last week, and
The
they were
elections
reporting
happened on the 24th.
Yes, they were.
So before the 24th,
No,
they were
understand.
reporting.
Yes, they were reporting.
On the
and
24th,
because
they
of this,
reported.
and people began. I don't know if it was on the 24th, Eric. I don't
On
know
the
if
day
it
of the
was
election.
12:59. I do not know. But what I'm saying is that when these incidences took place, reports were made, and then the edict was made. Do not quote
Western
do not
media.
talk about this. Don't.
Do not quote Western media.
So what's the problem? That's what we said. Don't.
Yeah, quote Western
But-
media,
but
but
look,
let SMC don't report.
In this very country of ours, we have known local activists. And every time they say something against the government, we say this is Western influence, negative Western influence. Now, when Magufuli says, don't quote Western media,
Or you
same
will be
influence.
arrested.
And this is in
because-
keeping
Or
with
you
what
will
he's done.
be arrested.
Because
You even
of-
had
Yes.
the government spokesman saying stern legal action will be taken against you.
And also-
That has never happened.
Why
Has that happened in Kenya?
Why is it that...
Has that happened in Kenya?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
oh,
yes,
yes.
in
it
this
has.
in this recent political dispensation
Yes,
that
Oh,
we
yes, it
have.
has.
Activists have been arrested in this country. You know, those same kind
By
of-
the way,
Yeah,
the-
when they're
Media.
disruptive and
Media.
throwing blood in
See,
parliament.
when
Media.
disruptive-
No, that's-
Media.
No. Once you start, remember freedom
talking
of
about
expression has-
media.
Disruption could be physical, or disruption could also be in how you write and how you communicate.
No. You have to understand, yes, if it's offensive, but you have to understand, even with freedom of expression and picketing and so on, you can't disrupt Nairobi city. You can't, especially if you haven't got the licensing and so on. So if you go out there
And that isn't
demonstrating, no. There's rules. It's actually
Oh,
a
now
limited.
there are rules.
No, there's limitations.
Magufuli has rules.
No, hold on. There's limitations to freedom of expression. Yes.
You know, we're talking about Kenya.
No, I know. I'm talking about rights, human rights globally. So if you're going to disrupt Nairobi as Boniface Mwangi does, let's say with his demonstrations, then yes, you will be arrested. If you have asked for a license and you have been denied it and you go and actually demonstrate and picket and disrupt people's daily lives as they go about their daily lives, then yes, you will be.
There was a
rightly
caution
so.
here in
You
Kenya,
will
Jerry.
be-
There was a caution to media houses not to broadcast live public rallies. Right?
Yes.
Was that gagging or was that not gagging?
Remember also we have had a history
Was
of
that gagging
no
or
we have
not?
had a history of tribal tensions, especially it wasn't gagging.
Look.
We have had a history. Remember, media can be limited
Because there
there's
are
a difference.
laws.
There's
Silvio,
a difference.
we're
Yes,
operating
and
the
you have to
CA
understand the rationale.
The CA in
the
issuing
rationale
what
behind
Ndu would
any
call an
limitations.
edict, the CA
No.
in issuing what Ndu would call an
What
edict
you
was
look
actually
at-
operating within the law,
what you
saying
look
media
at-
houses do not carry live broadcast
Yes.
of public
Now,
rallies.
for you to
now
ascertain-
Tanzania is
Yes,
using a law.
we know what they've done. For you
and
to
they're using
ascertain,
and they're following law,
Yes,
their
for-
own law.
for you to ascertain whether
No,
something
it's
is
not in law.
democratic or not.
It is not in law. What was said over the weekend is not in law.
Oh, so what is in
What,
law?
what is in law? What does the law say?
It's not in law.
What does the
No,
law
no,
say?
what
What
does
is
the law
said
say?
about this particular
What does the-
incident?
what does the law
I
say?
don't know what the law
Does
says.
Then
the
you
law-
cannot
does
say
in
it's
this-
not in law.
Does the law? Does
What
the law?
does it say? Does the law say
Does
that
the law-
Western media cannot be quoted in local elections? Does it say that?
Does the law
Does
allow?
it say that?
Does the law allow the president or the government to actually issue such an edict? That's the point of the law. It's not that the law says A, B, C, D. The law does not talk about gagging
government
Kenyan
has-
media and live. Does the government
has
have the
legal
right
authority
to
to do
so.
legal authority
You're
to go
missing
that
the
far?
point. The government has legal authority because the freedom of expression
Let's
has
take a
its
look at the traffic.
limitations.
Let's take a look at the traffic and then we come back. 0719 012 600. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
Sugar and spice and everything I spice it.
Spice up your
Mombasa
life.
Road is actually not happening today, unfortunately. It's 10 kilometers speed, basically. It is definitely bumper to bumper. Airport North Road is a parking lot. It's not moving, and this is combined with the fact that we have quite a poor road situation. The same can also be talked about around City Stadium, where traffic has been slowed down by motorists because of the fact that it would take a while to maneuver the potholes on the road. Are we seeing a trend here? Namanga Road at the East African Portland Cement, traffic is moving until you get to the Syokimau area, and you're not moving beyond that. So there's showers from Waiakiwe all the way to Mombasa Road. It is a beautiful day though, but you're going to experience slower moving because the heavens have opened up. Let's see what it looks like in a short while, but for now everybody's moving a little bit slower because of the weather conditions, and also because it's Monday morning and everybody's trying to get somewhere. Find a bottleneck, let us know. 0719 012 600.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Nyeri Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your
2
day.
minutes after 8 o'clock. So the Tanzanian government last week threatened to take legal action against journalists using foreign sources in their reports. In a series of tweets, Chief Government Spokesman Dr. Hassan Abbas accused reporters of spreading foreign propaganda and fake news by quoting international organizations and foreign representatives. Some news outlets in the country have been approached, used, and they act as agents in spreading fake news, rumors, and propaganda against our country from international organizations and representatives of foreign countries. Abbas accused journalists of neglecting the principles of their profession by failing to fact check.
Okay, so that's in the backdrop, of course, of authorities having censored and suspended newspapers and radio stations. They've arbitrarily deregistered NGOs, and they haven't conducted credible investigations into abduction attempts on the lives of journalists and opposition figures. So the government has actually passed quite a bit of legislation, and this is interviews based on 80 people in July, and what they say is there's been a lot of restriction on their freedoms that they previously had, so they can sense it. It's not a fight, it's not a freedom they were fighting to have. They had this freedom, this right to expression. So basically over the past 5 years, the government has enacted and began to actively enforce repressive laws. There's no doubt about that. So even as you're reading that statement and you're saying, well, they're doing this within the law, it is in the backdrop of all these things. There's the Cyber Act where you're not allowed to express yourself, and they've used this to target opposition and so forth. Now, we were talking about freedom of expression, and you were talking about the fact that sometimes the government does stop the likes of Boniface Mwangi here when he's demonstrating and so forth. Of course, your freedom or your right to express yourself, freedom of expression, it has its limitations. What you have to do is look at the rationale behind any limitations that are set forth. So, for instance, in Kenya, you can see in the run-up to elections where political temperatures are very high, of course, tribal divide and tensions are also fever pitch, you can understand why the government would ask the media not to air certain rallies. That is because of unity. It is not because the government does not want to be criticized. The government is very free with the media here. Dissent is not marginalized or it's not quashed. In fact, it is encouraged on our media platforms, on Twitter and so forth. Magufuli does not want this. Now, I am not saying there's anything wrong with it. Remember, I am for benevolent dictatorship. I like what Kagame is doing. I don't like interference by opposition whilst the country is developing. What I'm saying is he needs to come out and say we are not a democracy. Full stop.
Why must he?
Because
What I don't understand is, why must democracy be this thing that you keep describing? Why can it not
because
be?
it is what we're all aspiring to, and it is costly.
Isn't
If
it
comes
something
out-
that ought to be defined so that then you're
It
sure?
is
within-
defined.
Look,
No, I'm saying if
recently-
it's going to be
recently-
changed, if we're going to, if everybody's going to call their democracy a different kind of operation, then you need to say that this is clear within which tenets we are operating.
But they already are different. Just
Yes,
the
it's
other day-
different, but it
just
needs to
the
be
other
defined.
day-
You can't call yourself a democratic nation using
Because
the
then
tenets of that.
if you're not democratic, don't waste time on elections, have a one-party state,
Now,
use that money for
but
development
that's
and so
precisely
forth.
what I'm
you
trying to
understand?
say.
If we know you're not democratic.
You want to box this thing into one little cocoon that you think must be democracy.
No.
The other day we had this debate with the BBI and we're asking, what is this thing that these guys have come up with? Because it defies what had previously been defined. But it makes sense, does it not? One may not like it, but there's something logical about it. Look.
And I don't have
there's
a problem
something
with
in
it. You
America
can be
called the Patriot
undemocratic.
Act, okay? It was set in place to simply ensure that terrorism is checked in every way possible.
Right.
But in that process, there are people who argued they really infringed on very many rights. Now, Every country has a right to protect itself and its citizens. If I were to argue that's what Tanzania is doing, would I be wrong?
So you can say then in this case that that's the way Tanzania operates their own democracy.
Then it's no longer a democracy.
That's what I've been
This
saying
is-
all along.
Yes. Now, what I'm saying is, then
Homemade
you must
democracy.
understand that it's just by virtue of the way people operate and the way they think. When you call it democracy, they expect that certain things.
I've just given an example of something that you need to consider before you answer. The Patriot Act really stepped on rights.
Yes, but this is what I'm
It
saying.
infringe-
But this is what I am saying. According to the way in which Americans operate, then it is understood that that is how they are operating. And if you ask them, they will define it very clearly for you in terms of how their government is going to operate.
Actually-
what we are saying then is that it should be clear about what it is. If it is not, don't call it that.
My
That's what we're saying.
argument- my
And
argument
I've
isn't
always
even
said,
that.
and I've
I-
always
Have
said
Americans
that
stopped calling theirs
democracy.
a democracy?
No,
They
that's what
haven't.
I'm saying.
They're the
They've
leaders
defined
of
it according.
democracy, in
They've
fact.
defined
There
it
you go.
according to themselves. We're saying the
And
same
that is
thing.
exactly what Tanzania is doing.
No,
they don't have
it's
to come
not
out and
clear.
start saying,
It's not
there's
now,
clear.
therefore.
There's
Now,
a
As
fight
far
now.
as they're concerned, it is a democratic nation.
Exactly.
Yes, but what we are saying is it democracy according to the way Tanzania is doing it? Is it democracy according to the way Kenya is doing it? Is it democracy according to the way Rwanda or Nigeria is doing it? What are we saying it is?
it is
Now,
democracy.
No.
taken
Democracy,
it-
guys, democracy has its core tenets. It has its principles. And once these are distorted beyond recognition, it is no longer democracy. If the media cannot speak out, it is not democratic. The media plays a very important role in democracy. Now, I'm not saying people can't have their own systems. I have no problem with that. But remember, we've come a long way in
Actually,
fighting
you
for
do
these
have a
freedoms.
problem with that.
No, you can have any system you want. In fact, I'm for a benevolent dictatorship, personally. Yes?
know-
But if we're going to call it democracy, let's make sure that the principles and the ideals of democracy are being upheld. Here they are not. And
No,
this is my problem. People have fought long and hard to achieve some of these rights. And rescinding them at a whim because somebody is going for that authoritarian populism, it's something that needs to be questioned. Or we can completely disregard the fact,
So here's the
fact
thing.
that people have
Here's the
fought
thing.
to get to where they are in Tanzania.
The director of information in Tanzania said that journalists could face legal action for propagating what would be considered as fake news, right? And that's all he said. Don't quote people who are spreading propaganda. This is it. He has not said that you
And then
shall
they will,
now.
of
You
course, they
shall
will
not
be the
broadcast.
determinants of what fake news
Yes.
is. So you can see where this is going. They've covered themselves.
And he has said, fact check. If you go to court and you can actually show that what you have reported is factual.
Now,
and you've got the
how
facts.
free and fair are the courts? You have to understand the system of dictatorship and the machinery and how it works.
Yeah, let's talk
you
about
should
that.
have no
let's
problem.
talk about
you
the
should
courts
have,
in Tanzania. How free
hold
and fair
on,
courts in Tanzania? They are free and fair.
You
Has
should
there
have,
been any complaint about the
yes,
courts in Tanzania?
Yes,
the
I
judiciary
just
in
read you an
Tanzania?
excerpt here from 80 people who had been interviewed, and they talk about journalists who've been abducted and not returned, and they haven't had free and fair trials. We're not in Tanzania,
Our
so
courts
we
in
can't
Kenya are
sense
free
the
and
mood.
fair, right? And we keep talking about people who've been abducted left, right, and center. In our fight against terrorism, people who have gone missing. In our fight against crime in Mungiki, people who've gone missing. Are our courts free and fair?
Okay,
Our
I think
courts are free and fair.
it's reasonable to assume when a man is exhibiting signs of this authoritarian populism that he is, he will have under his control all arms of government, including the judiciary, in order to achieve his end, of which I have no problem with.
You know,
I think there's a lot of people who are happy with his
Our
leadership.
current Minister for Interior was once our Minister in charge of communication at some point. And there was a serious battle with the media houses. Why? Because the government felt that the media houses should conduct themselves in a certain way. And there was pushback. Simple. Just pushback. Sometimes the government may make a mistake. The government may issue something that the media houses or the free press feels it isn't right. This was internal. They use similar arguments. There's external influence, blah, blah, blah. It's always the argument. But there was pushback. They actually wanted to pass laws that would curtail the so-called freedom of the press in this country. Again, there was pushback. The government from time to time may want to pass laws that they think are protective in nature, that are useful. That's why an opposition becomes handy. If they think that is not what it's for, they will push back. Now, what I am discussing is the government right in taking certain steps that ensure that the citizenry is actually safe? Or are we saying that when the government takes that action and, in our opinion, it goes against the certain tenets of democracy, then it is wrong?
Well,
and I'm saying
those
that's not
actions should be made within the framework. There's established schema for this. There's actual frameworks, legal
But
frameworks,
Eric has read what they
constitutional
have done.
framework. If those actions are taken within that framework, then there's no problem. But if they're starting to impede on people's rights,
Eric
you
has
don't
actually
have
read
to.
what the person in charge of communication, the director,
Mm-hmm.
the exact thing that was stated.
You know, he's been nicknamed the bulldozer, and he's actually been targeting a lot of journalists, human rights defenders, and political opponents. That tells you a lot about the way in which Magufuli operates. I mean, we can say where's the proof and so forth. Of course, you're not going to get much news coming out of there either. But these are international. Amnesty International, for instance, has stepped in, and a lot of human rights groups. There is a lot of human rights abuses going on.
Let me
I am
take
not
this
saying there's
discussion
anything
elsewhere.
wrong in curtailing those rights. Don't get me wrong.
Let me step
but
it
it is
up a little
happening.
bit. When has the Western media ever spoken well of an African leader?
At what point, right?
Yes. No, that's what I'm asking.
Sustainably.
When? When they've spoken and said he's a wonderful leader. When Museveni came into power, they spoke well of him. How long did that last? When Kagame came into power, they spoke well of him. How long did that last? When Magufuli came into power, did they criticize him? No. All I'm saying is, when African leaders take a point and they seem to make an issue with Western media, don't just dismiss it as an African leader being dictatorial.
No, I mean, I've told you, the sort of sentiments towards him are divided in the country. And the people who had been spoken to in the excerpt that I read, the 80 people, those are Tanzanians who are complaining. So you'll find the sort of journalist fraternity, they'll have something to say. The opponents or opposition, they'll have something to say. But you do have people who say their life is better than it has ever been before. And that is the debate that I wanted to have, or I usually put across. It's that under a dictatorship, people can do very well and they're happy and they can develop. And he himself comes across, he doesn't try and hide the fact that he's authoritarian. He gives roadside decrees, for crying out loud. He sacks senior officials on the spot. He plays to the audience. And I don't have a problem with that. Now, what I'm saying is they are not democratic. They have undermined a lot of democratic ideals, which is fine. Come out with it.
So you're saying that he shouldn't speak in the open. He should be going back to his office and writing down, and so that he releases a statement. That's how institutionalized
she said
it should
she
be.
doesn't have a problem with that.
No. If you're going to fire people, there's mechanisms in place.
Don't say you're operating under democracy.
There's mechanisms in place if you're going to fire people.
The people who get fired, Nyeri, I am sure if you went back to Tanzania and actually followed up on how it happens, I'm sure you'll find out that after the president has said this person,
no, that is what you're hoping. That is
Yeah.
what you're hoping because you think there's some sort of system to it.
Do you have any information to the
Yes,
contrary?
this lady has said. First of all, she was
Do you have
fired on the
information
spot.
to the contrary?
Yes, first of all, she was fired on the spot
All right.
for not having a budgetary figure.
Was she?
That is why she was fired. And when she responded, I can't remember every figure. And then he says, you can't talk
So
to
what
me like
process
that.
was followed
Now, what
after
you're
that?
going to say, I bet he didn't really fire.
What
The
process
fact
was
that this
followed
is what
after
he's
that?
exhibiting, she was fired. She had to leave.
What process was
Process or
followed?
not?
But since
what
you said
process
there's a
has he
process
followed?
that was followed, what is the
Exactly.
process?
What is
Eric?
the
Do you
process
know?
that he has done
Do
in
you
the
know?
first
Process
place?
of firing a public official in Tanzania, was it followed or was it
It
not?
was-
But you
wasn't.
said
He
it
was
was. So now, do you
No,
know
hold
that
on.
it was?
She was
And
fired
since
by
when
the
have we had
president.
people who've lost their job saying, well, I was actually fired
hold on.
procedurally?
Yes,
So-
but
No,
if
she
we're
was
going to
fired by
argue
the
the
president. Did
contrary,
he
then
follow
can we
the
know how
process?
it is? Yeah.
Did he follow
if
the
Eric
process
is
in
saying that
firing
the
her
process
in
was
public?
followed, can we know what
I
it is?
can tell you something, right? I can tell you, I completely support the president standing up and asking, so what is the budget for this? And somebody is tapatapaing. You say, come on, really? You don't deserve to be in
It
that
wasn't
position.
a generalized.
You don't-
It was a figure he was looking for, a specific figure.
Yes,
Now
and
you
she's in
don't
charge
know.
of that figure.
Yeah.
She's in charge of the figure.
Yes, but
Is
you
she
don't
not?
know what
So
figure
you-
within figures he was asking for. Yes. So he asks for a figure, she doesn't remember it, and she is fired on the spot. What process is that?
Because she's...
What process is
she-
that?
No.
she has
I'm sure there's a
Eric,
process.
allow me to assist
what
She has
Njeri here.
process is that?
exhibited
The
incompetence.
process is
What
called
process
being
is that?
fired on the spot.
Yes.
That's the process.
That is it. And you're just fired right there and
On
then.
Yeah,
the
which
spot.
you're
Go
not
home.
supposed to do.
Go home. You don't
must
deserve to be
investigate.
earning from taxpayers' money.
No, because she couldn't remember one figure. No, it doesn't work like that.
And
Maybe she has a problem with memory, but she's brilliant with number crunching.
And what I've said is actually, if you go deeper and find out From
Why
that
don't you go
point
deeper and
on-
actually tell us instead
from
of
that
asking us to
point on,
investigate?
what
Why don't
what
you give
happened?
Why don't you tell us what happened? Because him firing her was not a process. He didn't follow due process. These are roadside decrees that he
Yes,
is making.
standing up to issue a roadside decree is one good thing, and it's a very
No,
good
there's
thing for
a
a leader
framework.
to do.
No,
and
there's
then
a
after that,
framework.
the framework
Okay.
kicks in.
Okay,
The
so you're
framework has
happy
to be
with
started by
you're,
someone.
you're happy with a benevolent dictatorship.
The
Yeah,
framework has,
clearly.
I'm happy with the democracy that Tanzania's John Magufuli
That is not
practicing.
democracy, my dear.
That is complete
That
democracy.
is not
Let's wind
democracy.
up on this one. What are your final thoughts on this, Jerry?
I'm liking what Magufuli has done. There's been some blowback, of course. There's been some backlash. But also you're seeing people say actually their lives are better than they've ever been. So he clamped down on corruption. Of course, there was some unintended consequences to that. Money wasn't circulating as it was, but we're starting to see the benefits of that. So I'm quite excited with what he's done. And maybe it's time other leaders around the region started coming down and focusing more on authoritarianism, paternalism, and making sure they look after us as opposed to promoting this democracy all the time.
City.
The sacking they speak of, they're speaking of two. The president actually sacked something like 9,000 civil servants in 2017. And that was because of credentials. And then when they sort of like verified them, 4,000 of them were reinstated. But this isn't being mentioned. Two people who are sacked seem to be the issue here. And yet, there was a very good reason.
One
If you-
person is one too many.
Oh no. Oh no. If you're sacked for a reason, there is a reason why you are sacked.
And the
Without
reason
due
stands.
process?
And it's public
Due
reason.
process, you read out earlier, is one of the absolute rights. Due process through the courts. So you can expect that to be
No, I was
extended
reading
amongst
absolute
So
rights
your
of-
final remarks on this, that's what you're making.
My final remarks are, we sometimes judge our African presidents using Western values. We must look at African presidents for who they are and what they stand for within the countries that they govern.
Well, before we allow you to come and close in, Ndu, I also want to say that I'm happy with what John Magufuli is doing in Tanzania. So democracy is democracy, yes, but also you've got to contextualize it. And I think what John Magufuli is doing is contextualizing. Institutions are strong in Tanzania. We've got media operating in Tanzania. We've got no street demonstrations like they're happening in other parts of the world. Tanzanians are happy. Ndu,
Give context a name. That's what I'm saying.
give the context a name. Tanzania's democracy, perhaps. 18 minutes after 8 o'clock. Good morning.
.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
At 19 after 8, good morning and thank you for tuning in to The Situation Room. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. My name is Eric Latif. We have Nyeri Thorn, Nduoko and CT Muga. We're live streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE. We're also live streaming on our YouTube channel, Spice FM KE, and our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. The conversation always happens as well on our social media platforms at Spice FM KE. That's our Facebook page, yes, and our Twitter handle is at SpiceFMKE. The conversation happens via the hashtag The Situation Room. We're broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4. We are in Mombasa at 7.9. We are in 102.5. Kisumu 96.0. Nakuru 96.7. Eldoret 90.9. Nyeri 97.7 in Malindi. Our whole country is actually experiencing heavy downpour. The Met Department has cautioned that this heavy downpour is due to continue for a couple of weeks. And we also have seen, of course, what happened in West Pokot, something very tragic, landslides and mudslides that have killed many people. Now, the government says they are 42. The national government says they are 42. The county government says they are 53. One of them is right, or maybe none of them is right. The fact of the matter is more than 40 people are dead in West Pokot. More than 100 other tens of thousands are camped in various areas where they have taken off from their homes because their homes were swept away, or because they've been told that where they live is dangerous and could be potentially hazardous. Also, other parts of the country, we've seen in northeastern parts of the country, in counties like Garissa, where flooding has happened in the town, in other sub-county areas, livestock killed. We've seen livestock also being killed, dying, and in parts of Tana River. We've seen it in Taita Taveta County. We've seen it in the coast. We saw the kind of heavy downpour that we had in Nairobi over the weekend. And we also saw the kind of heavy downpour we've seen it across the country. All in all, 42 counties have been affected by the ongoing floods, the kind of disaster that has come out of this. On Friday, the government, through the National Treasury, CS Ukuriatani, issued an international appeal for assistance because of this. And so this was an appeal that was sent out on Friday by the CS Ukuriatani. He says we are seeking for opening up a window for 3 months to mobilize internal and external resources to face this disaster. He's quoted all those 42 counties, among them Kericho, Bomet, Nakuru, Trans Nzoia, Busia, Marsabit, Garissa, Isiolo, Kakamega, Murang'a, Embu, Meru, Kitui, Mwingi, Nyeri, Kisumu, Siaya, all of them. What have we seen across the country? We have seen over the weekend, as this was launched on Friday, what have we seen the political leaders doing? Political leaders went, and of course we're talking about BBI. And one of the things that BBI raised is the fact that we seem to have lost our humanity as Kenyans. Many people are dead. 100 plus people are dead. Hundreds others are displaced. They need food, they need shelter, they need warm clothing, and they are not getting it. And what our leaders should be doing is basically rededicating their focus and attention to helping these people who are facing this. But what have they done? They've gone around the country. They're fighting Matiang'i is fighting PS Kibicho, fighting Ruto. This is the kind of rhetoric that we get from our leaders. Is it any wonder then that BBI says Kenyans have lost faith in their leadership? This is a direct exhibition of why Kenyans have lost faith in their leadership, because our leaders don't seem to care about us. All they care about is their own political ends.
Where did you see and hear about the BBI?
What did I see and hear about the BBI?
It's been in the papers.
Absolutely.
I've seen the BBI.
And could it be that perhaps the efforts that are being made, because I know, for instance, Eugene Wamalwa was in and out of the region, ensuring that food and emergency supplies was reaching those that needed it the most. I know Ruto, of course, when they're here, all they took was selfies and came back. That was more a PR stunt. But in terms of...
that's not all they did. It started off by telling us he went with 40 doctors. So that isn't a photo op situation. There were 40 doctors who actually went.
There was, okay, well, we don't know that for sure. We don't have evidence.
40 doctors
My
went.
point was...
We do have evidence, Jerry. We cannot discount this fact.
My
Doctors,
point
medics
was-
came from the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret, and they were heading to West Pokot County. They were stranded. They hiked a lift from a helicopter that Dr. William Ruto had used.
One
on the way
helicopter
there.
carried 40 doctors?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Anyway, my point was, I think it might be the media focus on the BBI and the politics as opposed to the actual efforts that are being made to ensure that emergency services and things that are needed for the aftermath and to deal with what's happened in especially regions like West Pokot, where there's a huge loss of lives. There's a lot that has been going on. Perhaps ministries are not communicating this, but they have mobilized and they were there, some even before Ruto himself. It's just that Ruto, of course, has the PR machinery to show off. So it's not a PR exercise. So perhaps this could be the reason we feel that the focus has been on the politics, the BBI and so forth. And also, let's be honest, something is happening in the country. It's a tragedy. It's tragic. We can't come to a standstill. Treasury stops working, all ministries stop working. The country goes on. It's terrible. And there's measures in place to try and, of course, save as many lives as possible and ensure that people are in better conditions, living in better conditions, but you can't expect for the country to come to a halt and a standstill. Things must continue.
Who is expecting the country to come to a halt?
Well, Eric's assertion here is that we focused on the BBI a lot more than we did. The media
He's
did,
right.
for sure. I think that was the media attention. And because the media understands...
Tell me what political leaders have done, because my point is directly on political leaders.
Apart from visiting the area,
Yes.
what have they done?
Even how many have visited the areas? Let's talk about all these counties that we are mentioning. We've seen the kind of issues that we've seen in Garissa County. How many leaders have we seen actually going to
Isiolo.
Garissa County or Isiolo to help the people there?
Or Mombasa.
I'm sure.
Or Tana River.
This is. I think you actually reinforce my point. What I'm saying is, media does not report on this. So I'm going to be hard pressed to find out. I have been in a sitting where I know Eugene Wamalwa, for instance, was very heavily involved in ensuring that emergency supplies reached the people who most needed them. Now, you can imagine that around different ministries and different agencies, but it's not being reported in the media because the media would far rather report the politicking because that's what we're thirsty for. That's what we're hooked on. And this is why we feel actually BBI is getting a lot more prominence. No, it's not.
So tell us
So
about
that's-
what the CS for Devolution and Assals, Eugene Amalo, is doing.
Well, I know he had taken, within a day, he had taken supplies there.
Where?
To West Pokot. He had taken supplies from food to medical equipment to blankets and so forth. But this is the problem. The media is not giving us enough information on this. So unless you're speaking to the person one-on-one, and they're not political pundits, they're not sort of politicians, and they're not looking to do any PR. So they might not be making pronouncements as we saw with the DP, for instance. But we did see Matiang'i as well. We saw different ministries go there. But the media hasn't amplified this. Its focus has been the BBI. But it's not to say that that's all the government is focused on. That's the first point. The second point is, life must go on. It's a tragedy. It's terrible that there's been losses of lives. I hope it's something they can look into and ensure, you minimize losses of lives next time or in an occurrence such as this. But life must go on. What should Treasury also stop doing, paying its loans while we focus on what has happened? And I'm not trivializing this in any way,
Yes, you
shape, or
are
form.
trivializing
No,
it.
I'm not.
The reason
It
why I'm
might come
keeping
across
quiet
as
is
that.
because,
I'm not.
100 people are dead. Yeah, but life must go on. So yes, why do
No,
we
what
need
I
to
mean
attend to
is
these
the
people?
functions of government
The
must
national-
carry on. So if there was a BBI report that was due to come out, it will come out. It's not to say that we have stopped activities. The two are not sort of mutually exclusive, where if one is happening, the other can't. There has been a lot of
You're very
activities.
stuck on defending the government.
I'm not.
You actually
I'm
completely
talk-
miss the
I'm-
point
no, no,
sometimes.
no.
I'm talking about political leaders. All right?
He didn't say government.
Our political leaders. I have not said
part of
the
government?
National Treasury, for example. The
No, I
National
was giving you
Treasury
an
did.
example.
The National
I
Treasury
was
on
giving
Friday
you an example.
launched an,
No. I was
launched
being
an appeal on
illustrious.
Friday.
I was giving you an example that is extreme. That even our national leaders, yes, they have spoken about Pokot. They have gone to Pokot, some of them. But there's also other issues that need to be dealt with that they have been dealing with.
Which
and
is
also,
what?
you don't
What is
get
more
the
important
coverage.
than actually saving lives
They-
in
they
a
have-
country?
they
What is
have
this-
been.
what is
Who
the-
says they
What is
haven't?
the number one primary
okay.
priority for any government?
Luckily, they understand that we have enough agency in terms of organized government departments and also things like the Red Cross for somebody like Moses Kuria not to have to rush to West Pokot. What is he personally going to do there as a leader, as a national leader?
He doesn't have to
What
go
is
to
he
West
going to
Pokot.
do?
Must he go to West Pokot? No.
Okay, what
Can
would
he
you-
take any action on that?
Okay, who
An
says
appeal-
he hasn't? This
an
is my
appeal-
point. The
an
media
appeal
hasn't
was
been
launched.
reporting on this.
An appeal was launched on Friday.
So you want to see... mhm.
Politicians, if they do something, they'll want to shout until they go hoarse. Because
Maybe
of
they
what
did
they've done.
something quite small
Because
and they're
of what
embarrassed
they
that
have
it's not
done.
as big as it should be
That's
seen.
right. That's-
No,
that
which is
also was
fine.
the point.
Which is fine. They've done their part. If you give 10,000 instead of 50,000, it's fine.
So how much,
Absolutely,
how
it's
much has
fine.
been collected so far?
You tell me. You're the one who knows about
by the
it.
time the government was launching this appeal on Friday, it was saying we need assistance. We actually do need assistance, local and international. We need to mobilize funds and resources. Mobilization of funds and resources goes very well hand in hand with a lot of rhetoric. You need to see actually leaders saying, yes, this is what is happening. You need to see people talking about it and saying 100 of our Kenyan people have died. Many more are in camps. They need food, they need shelter, they need blankets, they need warmth, they need to be evacuated. This is what we should be talking about as a country.
Who determines our discourse? Who dictates what we're thinking about?
This is a national disaster. The lead should be taken by the government.
Well, I think the media also has a role to play here. In that.
The media
Media
reports.
Yes.
The media?
The
Reports.
Not necessarily. You know that old, it's a long ongoing debate as to whether media reflects society or society reflects media. Now, media has been shaping our perceptions, opinions, and cognitions for the longest.
In its
They're the
reporting.
ones who feed us. They can choose what to report, what to highlight, what to put on
In
the headlines.
its reporting.
Absolutely. So why isn't the media making a big deal about this? Because then that would put pressure from us
Jerry.
Kenyans,
But
having
there's
read
nothing
that.
to
Spice
talk
FM.
about.
Of course there is. They could be
Jerry,
telling
Jerry,
us exactly
Jerry.
what is going on.
Spice FM is media. What we are discussing for this hour is basically this, is highlighting the importance of having a national conversation around disaster response and
Now,
management.
the media- the
So
media,
this is
even
the part
through
we are playing.
imagery, we
And
could
our
have been
part that we
seeing
are playing
along.
is we have not seen information from our other leaders, from our leadership, that we can be saying, oh, yes, we've seen. Ukuri Yatani has launched an appeal. We have
But
also
you
seen
realize the media can
Ministry of
actually act in
Interior,
a
this
way
is what
that
it
puts
has
pressure on
done.
the leaders
The CS
to act.
the CS for devolution and ASAL has conducted 17 trips
Yes,
across
now
the
what I'm
country.
saying,
now
do
we've
you
heard
realize-
of one where he's gone to West Pokot and come back.
That's one that
Of
I know
one.
that the media hasn't reported on. What I'm
you
saying
hear
is,
of
do you
others when you were there
realize?
in that
Do you
meeting?
realize? No, I didn't. I heard of him because it was him talking about it with his colleagues.
There you go.
Now, did you? There you go. What, Eric?
He has not talked
What?
about many others. He didn't talk
Why
about-
should you talk about others? He's
didn't
talking
talk-
about his efforts.
Yes,
as
he has
Minister
not
of
talked about the
Devolution.
other.
What would
ASAL,
you want him to
arid
talk about?
and semi-arid lands across the
Okay.
Republic of Kenya,
Now, what I'm
not
saying,
just West Pokot.
Let me go back to my point about the media. The media can actually put pressure on these leaders, and they're not doing that. What's happening here is we're otherwise being distracted by, as you say, BBI and what have you. I'm just saying the media could play a bigger role. It is what is shaping our conversations. So it's not just that the media is reporting, it's choosing what to report, what to amplify, what to give what column inches. If the media every day was posting pictures of the human lives that are being lost, believe you me, the sentiments and in turn pressure on these government leaders to act would be very different. That's my point.
All right, so we're discussing the national disaster that is, the Treasury has actually called it a national crisis that's facing at least 42 counties across the country. And this is as a result of the ongoing rainfall and the effects of the ongoing rainfall. People are stranded, people are dead, 100 people have died, hundreds of thousands of animals, livestock dead, hundreds of people stranded in makeshift camps, and they need warmth, they need shelter, and the government has launched this appeal. What have the political leaders done? They're talking about BBI. Good morning, 28 minutes to 9 o'clock.
.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Traffic.
All right, there are tales of woe on Kiambu Road. Everybody is crying. Traffic in both directions this morning, all the way past CID, and trying to then connect with Thika Road is giving us serious problems today. Joining Thika Road, where there are some showers right now, and everybody is moving just a little bit slower by virtue of the fact that it's raining. Ngong Road, all the way from the Junction Mall now, is traffic, and it's because it's raining quite heavily on that part of the road now. So there's traffic all the way from Naivasha Road heading all the way down to the City Mortuary roundabout. It is raining quite heavily at this point, so please, guys, be careful as you traverse the city. Ridgeways towards town, we now have 5 lanes. I'm not quite sure why that's happening, and the police have disappeared. Obviously, the rain chases lots of things away. Langata Road is bumper to bumper. There's a gridlock there as well, and it's quite serious. So everywhere you look around the city is traffic, and more traffic, and this is compounded by the fact that it's raining. So we're going to ask you guys to be quite careful, and you're going to have to sit it out because everybody's slowing down because of the weather conditions. Let's see what it looks like in a short while, but for now you have to sit it out. 0719012600.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Over 100 people have died across the country, many more stranded in makeshift camps, livestock dead because of the ongoing rainfall and the devastating effects of it. What have we seen from our political leaders? That's a conversation that I'm raising this morning. Our political leaders seem to be concentrating more on the politics of 2022 and the back and forth of throwing barbs at one another. And they're not concentrating on a national conversation about the effects of people dying, and people are dying. The National Treasury last Friday launched an appeal. Ukuri Yatani, the acting CS for the National Treasury and Planning, launched an appeal for local and international resource mobilization to come in aid of those who have been affected.
These efforts that are trying to be worked on to make sure that those, because I think now largely what we're looking at is after disaster management, trying to provide food, shelter, whether it is makeshift shelter. And now is Kenya saying we don't have the money to get this done? Because the appeal is to give us funding, right? Whether it's local, asking Kenyans to I don't know if there's a pay bill, or asking Kenyans to contribute, asking the international community to contribute. So we don't have any money to even mitigate this disaster.
Our resources are stretched. Just so to put it, right? And that's why we have actually launched this appeal so that people can come in and contribute, local and international. So you may find people like organizations like MSF, Doctors Without Borders. They may come in and help in terms of resource mobilization for, communicable diseases. You may be able to now raise funds through Red Cross or other channels which can go towards helping these people. Blankets, food stuff. Whatever is needed, this is actually a national disaster. It's a crisis that's unfolding in the country. But the Tema government is basically launching this and saying, I'm opening up the window for the next 3 months so that people can mobilize resources. They're saying, what we have is not enough. We may need help.
And what's wrong with that?
Nothing.
Okay. So what's your point? That we're still focusing on politics and all our focus and efforts and thoughts should be in West Pokot?
Actually, it's not even that, I think. It's a disregard for the tragedy that is before us. And the narrative seems to be politics and BBI as opposed to this strategy, because it isn't Pokot. It is all over the country. All over. And the problem with the floods is that lives are being lost, livelihood is being lost, people are being taken back to zero as a result of these floods. Yes.
And you're finding that leaders are not involved enough in the discussions?
They're
Yes.
focused elsewhere.
They're focused elsewhere. And they're showing that basically from the meetings that they're holding, wherever they're holding their meetings, they're holding political meetings, political rallies. They're not actually holding meetings or even having a conversation about...
These are politicians of certain regions.
They are leaders.
They're politicians of certain regions. Leaders include the executive as well, whom we've seen have these discussions. We've seen them now call out for people to come in and volunteer, whether it's time or money or what have you. So you have to understand, with political leaders, they'll be more focused on their region. Yes, they have rallied up behind this and perhaps donated some money, but it's going to be short-lived because they have their local politics.
You know, when you
to
begin
deal
a
with.
statement with "you have to understand," you seem to be presuming that we do not understand.
It's a figure of speech, CT. Let's not dissect all
I am
my
dissecting
English.
it
No, it's a figure of
because I am
speech.
dissecting it. And why I have to dissect it is because it is one thing to understand that the government does what it does. We understand. But if we're to discuss the government and what we ought to understand that there's a disaster management unit that is supposed to have been prepared to deal with the disasters. Do we know how much money they have for disasters? Do we know what plans they have for disasters? Do we know what they have done so far? Now, that is the question I would begin with if I were to understand.
Well, I think it's clear in terms of preparedness. In terms of preparedness for quite a number of things, leave alone disaster management, it is clear that we are it's quite lacking. Because if something else were to happen, we would be at pains to even figure out where to start from. It's actually quite sad also that we don't know what the policy is then towards disaster in this country, and then saying at this point, because right now we have a hands up approach, hands up in the sense that we have been defeated, we don't know what to do, we're asking then for you to come and help as a government with whom the mandate lies to make sure that some of these things are well taken care of. I mean, there's no emergency kitty to take care of things like this. There's no emergency preparedness whatsoever, and the world is telling us, I mean, the world is sending out alarms that things are going to happen in the near future. What is our preparedness like? If you ask me, this is a unique opportunity to actually review what some of those your plans might be, if there are any plans in place, and if there are none, to put some in place. Because how many times are we going to have this? I can't think of one. And it's very sad that I can't think of one whereby we could say it was wrapped up, it was taken care of, and we had all that we needed. We didn't have to ask, what are we going to do, or stand around looking one to the other and say, what are we actually going to do? I cannot think of one that has happened whereby the preparedness was optimum.
We were warned. The meteorological department stated categorically, not once, not twice. They said heavy rains expected in various parts of the country. They took it further. 29th of December, they said this is what's going to happen. Took it further. Up to the 3rd of December, this is what's going to happen. Then they said, expect it to extend beyond the 3rd. They have been saying it. If you are a unit that's supposed to prepare for disaster, and the people whose job it is to forewarn you about these things has
Have
forewarned you. You've been forewarned.
That's their job, to tell you that this is going to happen.
That's their job, and they've
Right.
told you, and they keep telling you.
And then,
Then
you
it
who have
happens.
the instruments, you then who have the
Who should
instruments,
have the
who should
instruments.
have the instruments with which to do
stop-
something, not
to
to
stop
stop
the heavy
it.
rain,
No,
or-
no. Look, the rain is going to come. The fires will come, the rain will come. That one we know, it will come. But in the event that it happens, how prepared then are we to deal with that? Because the information is given.
In
And
advance.
in advance, the information is given. And I was actually looked through the Met or any other meteorological department around the world. They're not going to tell you this a week too. They're able to predict these things 3 to 4 months in advance, and they share pertinent information with national governments. That is what they are mandated to do. They see something coming, they tell you. So that in the event that something happens, you would then be prepared to deal with it. And we're not saying that you stop the flood, but we're saying that could you mobilize people to move? Could you mobilize or say, okay, let's say fine.
Who says they're not doing that?
Let's
Because
even
they
go
have-
because we have reports of people being stuck for
Yes.
4 days.
Yes.
5 days.
And it could be because the conditions don't permit those who are responsible for
So
rescuing.
which conditions
to
will
get
change
there.
when
You had that
Medecins
with
Sans
Hurricane
Frontières comes
Katrina.
into the country, for
you
example,
had
and is
that
able to lift people out?
In the States with Hurricane Katrina, you couldn't get to people. And Matiang'i has expressed as much. You don't want to endanger any further lives, even in the rescue mission. And perhaps roads and bridges have been cut off with the rains and floods.
So with this
it
appeal
becomes
that's
very
being,
difficult.
with the appeal that's being sent out, how will the conditions change? That Medecins Sans Frontières,
So
for
say-
example, is going to
say
come
we
in
mobilize
and
resources.
rescue. How will the conditions change? That somebody, an
Well, the
external
rains have
body is going to...
resided to a certain extent. I don't know the ins and
No, they
outs. What I'm
haven't.
saying is the government is doing something about it. I think the media is not giving that something about it enough coverage and is actually giving BBI and the political rhetoric and the political talk a lot more coverage, and we're feeling as a result that the government is not getting involved. When I say the government, the executive arm, of which it is their job, yes, even our leaders at MPs and so forth, but they also have their constituencies to tend to. Once they've given what
So
they
let's
can.
look at the constituencies that could be affected. The counties, 42 of them, 42 out of 47, okay? So tell me which leaders don't have a region to tackle.
If you look at the leaders that are being quoted in the news at the moment, because we're not being given information about leaders in those regions. The media is very heavily focused on BBI. The media is heavily,
Yes,
we're getting
which-
a lot of
which-
information. So
which
if you look at
leaders are
the
we-
Moses Couriers, Mount Kenya, that problem isn't there.
All right, so
they're the ones being given the
let's go.
airtime
The
and they
counties
call them
affected:
inches.
Machakos, Kitui, Mwingi, Nairobi, Nyeri, Kiambu, Taveta, Busia, Kisii, Murang'a, Embu, Meru, Kirinyaga, Tharaka Nithi, Kitui, Taita, Kericho, Bomet, Nakuru, Baringo.
Yes, but in terms of to the extent where relief aid is needed or where sort of emergency supplies are needed, we're looking primarily at West Pokot.
No,
Hey.
no, Njeri.
No.
42 counties
Are affected. I
are
understand
affected.
that. But in terms
No.
More
of
than-
emergency aid and where
Emergency
it's needed.
aid is needed to
Every
all
year.
those
All
affected
those 42.
areas.
No, for me, emergency aid is needed.
In
where
Garissa, for
people
example,
have been cut off survival.
people have been cut off. We saw pictures of camels that had been stuck somewhere for days. They could not get out because they were stuck in the mud. We have seen floods in Garissa County ravage the whole area. Tana River, we've seen the same. Areas down the Seven Forks, we've seen the same. We've seen the same in parts of Murang'a County as well. We've seen that happen. We've seen it in, West Pokot, of course, where the most number of people have died, but across the country.
But here
And
in
this
West
is the
Pokot,
thing,
I
it's-
think is where, because people have had to desert their villages and leave their livelihoods. It's quite different. Yes, you do have places that have been getting flooding. I don't contest that across the country. You had it in Nairobi, Aga Khan Hospital or what have you. But in terms of emergency relief aid and relief food and so on, I think West Pokot is where it matters most. And I think you will find, my point here was, you will find the leaders from those areas are actually focusing on that, but the media is not reporting on that. That is my point, that we're not getting the coverage of what's being done.
Allow me to just state this morning that you're completely misinformed.
Okay.
Completely. Because the fact that the people you talk to don't report about these things, or they focus on the things that are happening to them, and the fact that, as you say, the media doesn't report, it doesn't mean that these people do not need help.
I'm not saying they don't need help. No. You've completely misconstrued what I'm saying. I am not saying they don't need help. We're talking about what the national conversation is and why it is what
the national government is doing, not conversation.
Yes, what is not happening is the media is not reporting what the government is doing.
And what are they doing?
That is my only point. Don't put out that I said they don't need help. Where did I say that?
Page 2.
Where did I say that?
Page 2 of the Standard, a full page report on the effects of landslides and floods across the country. All right. We have seen more. We have seen more coverage about West Pokot and the kind of help that's needed. Pokot mudslide exposes sloppy disaster response. That is page 12 of the Standard. Rescue camps are risky, says disaster team in West Pokot as well. And so the entire page 12 of the Standard
is talking about what is happening in West Pokot. I don't doubt that. What I'm saying is the media is not reporting on what the government is doing.
What is Eric reading?
It is reporting on what is happening in terms of force majeure, the nature of things that, landslides
the response
are
as
happening.
well. The response
and
as well.
And perhaps it's not giving it as many column inches that it should. This is why we feel that BBI is the focus.
On page 12, a full page on page 2 on the Standard.
What is the headlines on those pages?
How many pages do we get on The Nation? Just
Hold
check.
on. No, Eric, what is the headlines on those pages?
The headline on the stage is about BBI.
No, the headlines on those pages that you're looking
on
at.
The two pages?
Where they're reporting about...
More killed in landslides, floods, havoc.
Okay, is that anything to do with what the government is doing? No.
Yes, it
has
to do with what the government is not doing. Because had they done those deaths that the report would not have occurred.
You don't know that for sure. No matter what the government does, it can't avoid. I mean, even in countries like Japan, where the government does everything it can,
let's see how many government officers have been quoted here. So let's start with
no. By virtue of the fact that it is not headlines.
Sub-county police command.
No,
so the headline should be government has come in.
This is what I'm telling you. Yes.
The headline is that people have died.
Yes, I understand.
According to Jerry, the media must report these things in a certain way.
No, you're missing my point.
So then how do we know then what the government is doing?
Because the media is not telling us what the government is doing. That is my point.
But then in this case, where they're talking about there's been more deaths, we've also talked about the fact that, a relief supply has not reached some people. In terms of what we do know.
How do we know that? The media's reported. How do we know that the government has called for assistance?
On Friday, the media will not report, generally speaking, on positive stories. That the government has now done this, the government is doing this. Generally speaking, the public doesn't buy that.
Do you think that if the government had been able to do something in terms of making sure that we've reached some progress when it came to just the rescue of these individuals or provision of basic amenities that they needed, this national appeal would have been called for and this international appeal would have been called for?
It's a hands up stance right now. Who reported it?
Exactly. It's a hands up stance right now. We are not able.
Nothing is being done.
We're not able to deal with what we see in front of us. So you Kenyans, come help us. International, come and help us, because we can't.
We don't know.
Okay, I will tell you. Listen, we're not
number
a banana
12,
republic.
Page number 12 of the Standard. Rescue camps are risky, says the disaster team. Okay, the disaster team is a multi-agency disaster response team that wants some camps set up for landslide victims closed. This, of course, the disaster team comprises KDF, the government, the Red Cross, talking about Tamkal Primary School. So that's a headline, all right?
That is not a headline. I can see that is two
Rescue
column
camps
inches.
risky, says disaster
Yes,
team. A headline is that.
Imagine if that was on the front page, then we would understand the challenges that government is facing as they try and rectify the situation, as they try and save lives or make sure that relief aid is reached to those people. But it is not the headlines. Instead, what we have on the headlines is I can't see your paper.
It's about revealed Kenya's most popular high schools.
Okay, which is of no consequence. What is that?
This is about news.
That is of no consequence. Kenya's most popular high school.
This is secondary school selection.
That is our paper that I criticized.
But why are you saying it's of no consequence?
I feel that other headline should have been there, where the government or these agencies are reporting that these camps are now dangerous. That is the sort of news we need to hear, but we're not hearing it. This is my point. Hence, we feel government is not bothered. Government is actually politicking. But things are happening. Those people who are reporting that they're having problems trying to save lives and the camps are not safe, how do they get there? They're there to help. And this is government. This is government agencies working with the Red Cross. That the media is not reporting it is what is giving us the sense that actually politics is taking over and politics is more important. But that's not the case.
We've seen a government spokesman, right, talk about disasters. For example, the Likoni one, he was there, he was talking about it. He was giving briefs more than once a day. How many times have we received a brief from Colonel Cyrus Oguna on the disaster across the country?
I haven't heard of
How many times a day? He was in West Pokot last week,
Yes,
and
he was.
he's the one who actually discounted the figure from 50 something to 43. He's the one who said no. He reduced the number of dead by a whole 10, right? And he told us this is something we should be getting on a regular basis, on a daily basis. There should be constant communication, and then the political leaders as well. This is what they should be talking about. When the political leaders are coming to tell us, oh, where we go, and if you've been given the job by the president, just know you've been given the job by the people of Kenya. This is not the kind of rhetoric we want to hear. That's what I'm trying to say this morning. It's about mainstreaming a disaster. And we are not mainstreaming a disaster as
Who
a
is
country.
responsible for that?
Political leaders, national
media.
leadership, leaders take the lead.
The media gives them the platform and decides how much airspace they get.
If they were actually doing it, if there
They
was a-
are doing it.
if there
This
was
is
a-
my point.
if
When
there-
Colonel Loguna was here, we spoke to him and said, this matter of Likoni would have been better understood if you kept giving us an update.
Yes.
Update
Now,
of
And
the
he-
remember,
and he
Likoni, there was
agreed.
also pressure from the public because it was something that was being spoken about by the media very heavily. It was followed. It was a human interest story whereby people were gripped, wanted to know what would
when
happen.
100 people have died,
Yes.
it's human interests.
The media needs to report
But
it as
before-
such.
but
No, the
before
media
today-
needs to
This
report it
CS
as
for
such.
devolution that is flying one helicopter around to West Pokot and coming back should actually be holding media conferences and saying, this is what we are doing.
No, he's actually doing the work. He's not doing the PR. The
No,
media
but
should be
He
following
is not
up.
the helicopter
The
pilot.
the
He is not a
media-
helicopter
no,
pilot.
no,
He
no,
is
no,
not
no.
the one loading on the
He
food
is
onto the helicopter.
CS.
No. His
He
job
the
is to
CS.
coordinate.
Yes.
He should be there telling us
No,
this
he-
is the coordination
No,
I'm
no, no.
doing.
It's for the media to go and find out that information.
Eric,
It's not for them to call
there
press
you go.
conferences.
Before today, how much has the media covered this issue of floods? Every single
Every day.
And in
Every day.
details, every single day. What more are they supposed to do?
Cover what the government is doing about it.
And if there's nothing to report,
No, there is.
nothing
There's
to
a lot
report, there wouldn't be a story.
Look, there is the government actually talking about some of the hurdles that they're facing and actually warning that some camps are dangerous. It's been given, you said it's on page 12 for starters, and then I saw it's a thin column on the edge of a page. This is the problem. If these were headlines, we'd then understand some of the challenges that
It tells you the
government
importance
is
that
facing.
the team on the ground has also been given. All right?
No, it tells you the importance that the media has decided
Who
to give
spoke?
the team on the ground.
If the person who has spoken is just a mere captain, then that's it. That it just shows
No,
you
not
how
everybody is
important
doing PR
has this
stunts.
been given. Who is leading this multi-agency team task force?
Not
Who's
everybody
leading
is
it?
after media
There you
attention.
go.
They know they're resolving the problem.
I want to
That's what
open up the
matters.
phone line 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. Also, you can comment on Facebook, Spice FM KE, and on Twitter, our Twitter handle is @SpiceFMKE. 8 minutes to 9.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Is it leaders or is it media or is it the public? Who is it that should be mainstreaming the conversation about a national disaster that's befallen the country?
what Nyeri is right about is this. Without government intervention, even some of these interventions that we see by agencies that are trying to assist would actually not take place. World Food Programme have actually come out very strongly and stated categorically that the government of Kenya has taken a lead and made it possible for agencies like themselves to actually come and assist in this. So there is truth to that. But it's not just West Pokot, it is 42 counties. So West Pokot has been the focus. All our reporting has been on West Pokot. They mentioned Isiolo in passing, mentioned Garissa in passing, mentioned a few other places in passing, but West Pokot has been the focus. Now, it is not to say that these people are not suffering. They are. They certainly are. Now, if you have a disaster management unit that actually understands what it's supposed to do, it's not just a question of averting or preventing or dealing with the problem, but also reporting, because that information also tells you what is happening. Now, the media may very well be responsible for reporting it, but surely the agencies involved should also take the pole position in ensuring that they give out that information. Yes.
Well, maybe because they're so involved, they're not out to give out the information. It's
must
not a
there be
PR
excuses
stunt.
for everything
No,
that they
no, no.
don't
It's
do?
not an excuse. It's a reason as to why they haven't done it. I think it's for the media to go and get this information, and once they've got it, which they have, an example of it, then they need to actually put it in a position or give it prominence so that people can see the importance of it. But when the media is giving prominence to the politics, this is what is going to occupy people's minds: availability bias.
Jerry.
This is what you're being fed. This is what you're going to think about, and as a result, you will think that the government is not doing anything.
Jerry, you know, when the government actually mainstreams an issue and it makes it a big issue, it will become news. There's no way the media can actually avoid that. It will become the news. If the government, for example, was having a daily conversation about this is our crisis, this is what we ought to do. So yes, we've allowed in World Health Organization, we've allowed in MSF and all the other agencies, the Red Cross is doing this and that around the country, and this is what we are doing, and this is how much help we need. This would be the national conversation, the big national conversation. This is not what's happening. It's left to things are just happening behind the scenes in the background.
So
And
what is it you want, Eric? You want information?
This is a national disaster. In fact, this statement,
And it has been given the
this
prominence,
statement
but for
by
the media
Okur
now
Yatani
taking
starts
on
by
the
calling
politics.
it, as you're aware, as announced by His Excellency the President, Kenya has been experiencing floods and devastating landslides that have been triggered by the torrential rains across parts of the country.
the
This
president has
calls for
spoken about
urgent
it.
interventions by the government to mitigate the impact of these events as our people, on our people.
Okay,
right?
so there's
So
one
this is
person
it.
who's spoken about it.
So this is it.
The
This-
president spoke about it. Who
the
else do you want
president,
to speak
the,
about
the
it?
president released a statement. Okur Yatani released a statement. All right. Whereas they could actually be holding press conferences where they're speaking one-on-one, live.
To say
When
what? They don't
Same
have
thing.
to-
when
to
you
say-
talk about
Why-
mainstreaming
why do
something
you have
in communication, Jerry,
No.
when you send a
You
statement,
don't have to
and
hold
when
a
you
press
actually-
conference. You have
need
told
to.
the media. You have released a statement.
You need to.
No, you don't.
This
You
is what is
don't.
called mainstreaming and information at something. When, for example, the KCSE results and KCPE results are released, you see the CS for education plus the education officials right there releasing it. Right? They could just send a statement and say, results are out.
Done.
Log on to www, send an SMS to this and that and get your result. No. You mainstream it. You make it
so
a big thing.
what you're complaining about perhaps is their communication strategy, but the fact that they're doing something about it, you have no issue.
Their
with.
communication strategy actually
Okay.
shows you that they are
No,
not
it's
so
down
serious
to the
about it, that they are
media
not
now.
doing
For
enough.
me,
They're
no.
not
What
doing
it means
enough.
is that they have released enough information for the media to decide. Actually, this is what should be the dominant discourse amongst Kenyans. It's what the government is doing. It's the fact that there's this floods going on. But instead, the media, of course, we tend to focus on what's political because Kenyans are politically charged and hungry for
I
it.
think you tend to focus on what is right there for you to gobble up. And I think it's clear.
No, I'm saying the media, what the media tends to focus on.
Yes, in terms of what's being fed to them, that is what they're going to report on. But in terms of now because it was clear on Friday when the appeal was made, everybody spoke about it because that was fodder for them to report something on. It is clear that in terms of what is being done when it comes to the management of this, there are sentiments that are being put out there. There's, yes, we need something to be done. We need help. We need appeal. But then that's it. We need help. We need assistance. And then?
Yeah,
So
beyond
the
that.
only beyond that?
What's the form shape of this assistance? Is it a pay bill number? Are you asking for people to bring in their helicopters? Are you?
In the past, the assistance, it's been clear. We need assistance with food. We need assistance with this. We need
Rescue.
assistance with this. And in case you want to donate money, there is
This
this
is the
pay
channel
bill
you can use.
that you can do A, B, C, D. And people responded. And it was in the media. That's how we got to know about it. You know, it isn't as though one wishes to wake up in the morning and find fault with the government. No. But when there's fault, it has to be stated.
When there's something as glaring as this,
Yes.
when 100 people we're looking at around the country now, because we're not just talking about West Pokot, across the country now, I think the numbers are at 100 in terms of lives that have been lost, people's lives that have been displaced. Now we're looking at families in the hundreds, families that have been displaced. It is something that grabs national attention, and it's something that should be focused on with as much regularity as other issues in the country. And that's clear. And I don't think there's a roundabout way of saying it. It's evident and obvious that this should actually grab attention in terms of what is actually being done. And if it's not, then it's quite unfortunate.
We should be seeing meetings being held. We should be hearing about meetings that have been held and what kind of resource mobilization is being sought and where it's going and how it's going. When we are able to bring people all the way to Nairobi to launch a report, which we could have disseminated through other means, it means that we can also mainstream something as big as over 100 people dying, their livelihoods lost and destroyed. This is as big as any other. And when we miss the point, then we miss the point completely. Good morning. This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Of course, remember we are live streaming as well on www.spicefm.co.ke. We are also on Twitter, SpiceFMKE, and Facebook, SpiceFMKE. You can call in 0719 012 600. It's 9 o'clock.
Sugar and spice and everything I spice it.
Kiambu Road
Spice up your
inbound at a standstill from Ridgeways. Nothing is moving, unfortunately. On Mombasa Road, trying to get down is going to be an issue this morning, and we just understand that across the city, wherever you look, from Langata Road to Ngong Road, within the CBD, everything is moving a lot slower because of the downpour that we have this morning. Thika Road is not happening either. Finally, the accident and all the has been cleared up from the underpass at Pangani leading to the Wangari Maathai Way, and that has been sorted out. Kiambu Road, unfortunately, is quite tight, and there's traffic all the way from Kasarani to Muthaiga, from Evergreen to Ridgeways. Nothing is happening there. So let's see once the rain stops if we can have a better situation where cars are now actually moving. So for now, sorry man, no good news. Nothing is moving. It will soon, we hope. 0719012600 is the number to call. Send us a message, give us a shout, and let's see how we can try at least keep you comfortable while you wait.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Nyeri Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to
It's
start
2
your...
minutes after 9. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room. We're discussing the national crisis that we have, well, as a country, and how our leadership is actually responding to this. Let's take in your calls. Brian Tanu in Mombasa, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I would like. Yeah, good morning. I'm Tanu Brian,
Yes,
Yes.
Brian, go ahead.
calling from Mombasa, and I would like to appreciate whatever you're talking because what you're speaking actually is just out of fact. Yeah, the current situation actually in media, I would like to say it is not that good. They are like working on political issues as compared to humanitarian that they should be having. And what I should be requesting that people should urge government itself to work on this. They should speak to at least things that are much concerned with the human being's life. Because at the end of the day, life is without me. Actually, the government cannot be there. Because if I'm dead, then it should not be. The government cannot rule anybody.
Right. Thank you very much, Brian.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, he talks about, yes, of course, the media and the media's role in highlighting these issues of national importance.
Well, with, of course, the agenda setting theory, Eric, as you should in communications, the press don't reflect reality. They actually filter and shape the reality. And then, of course, depending on what they concentrate on and what they give more airtime and column inches to, that creates the impression that that is the most important thing. And I think this is what the media has done in this case. And in an interesting and sort of ironical way, it is a reflection of society in that it's a reflection of what we're hungry for as society, because we've been primed and conditioned to want politics. We want to hear what's going on. We're politically charged as Kenyans. So the media is in essence feeding us what we're addicted to, but it's also setting the agenda and making us feel that something is not as important, and hence your sentiments. It has actually been informed. That's why I asked you, where did you get this information from? It's the media. Now, for you to turn around and say, actually, what the government does should put pressure on the media, you're then suggesting the media is can be manipulated by the leaders. Then you question the independence of the media and whether we should then trust it if that's the case. But for me, what I'm saying is something is definitely going on. It's just that the media is not reporting it. It's given more prominence to the current politicking that we have with the BBI and so forth. But it's not to say that the government is not doing anything about the flooding. There's no doubt about that.
In the West, we have newspapers who have clear leanings. They are either social leaning, as in labor leaning, or capitalist leaning. So they begin with a clear stated bias. Now, when you're talking about independence, I assume independence would mean that if that is your bias, so be it, it's allowed, and we understand that is your bias. So this absolute and total utopian so-called freedom that the press is actually supposed to have is not possible anywhere on this planet, for the simple reason that it is owned by people who have an agenda. It is owned by institutions who have an agenda. And that agenda, as you correctly put it, will, of necessity, take the pole position. But in this country, when you talk about what interests the public, I'm glad you mentioned that the media then clearly, as you're saying, has enslaved the minds of Kenyans. They've put the minds of Kenyans, they've grabbed it, held it in a position where all they do is want to listen to politics. True, yes, but the way people have reacted to this disaster is not something that is going to pass away, because it isn't just in one place. You read about it, but you're also facing it. So it's something that, whether it's reported or not, it is a reality that you're going to face. Now, the government makes a point when it is in their interest to ensure that the citizenry read about the things they want the citizenry to read. So, yes, the media should report, but it is the government's role. This particular issue of disaster, this is government function through and through. They should come out and take that lead. And we are saying that lead isn't clearly being shown. Their interest seems to be diverted elsewhere.
The lead in the communications, or the lead in...
Let's start with the communication. And then the lead in
actual
response to the problem, in trying to alleviate what we know is already a problem.
But who says they're not taking the lead? Of course, it's the government in the lead to the response to the problem. In terms of the communication, I don't think that's their focus. This is not a matter of winning hearts and minds. There's nothing to try and convert people. The BBI, you can understand why it's received the prominence and why government officials would be pushing this. There's a mind shift that they're trying to create. Here, it's an actual, activity that needs to be carried out by the government. It has nothing to do with other people. Yes, now that they've called and appealed for help, they might ramp up their communications. But generally speaking, it's a matter of the government actually getting their work done. This is not a communications issue.
So, Citi said the media has actually reported this issue of floods on a daily basis across all platforms, social media, newspapers, radio, TV,
you name it.
It's everywhere. And in all those places, whenever the media is actually on the ground, the people that they want to quote are the government sources, because those are the dependable sources. The number of government sources that are being quoted shows you that we don't have government on the ground. All right? So when you see, for example, that in West Pokot, we're still talking about people are dying and people need people need foods, people need shelter, people need medicine, it's because the government is not there on the ground, actually showing that people are receiving all those things that we're talking about. It's not there. And the government in Nairobi is not communicating about what it needs to do, what it ought to do on the ground. And that's exactly the point here, that the government is not mainstreaming a national disaster. It's not counting 100 people's death as anything major for it to actually react in a big way.
Because the media hasn't reported that.
No, because the government has not communicated that.
Because, we do have reports of rescue from Red Cross, for example, and that has been very prominent. And this is the local media reporting on what the Red Cross has done around, especially in West Pokot. Some of the rescue that we've seen has actually come from the Red Cross. And now we're saying on ground. I'm at pains to understand. I'm at pains to believe that if they were reporting, for example, at a rescue operation that was being carried out by the Red Cross, and there was government on ground, that would not be reported as well.
It would be both.
I don't see how that.
It would actually be
would
saying the person who's coordinating this operation is government and
assisted by Red Cross, for example.
Let's close this up. Ndu, your point.
Well, I think disaster management, unfortunately, you cannot see the expression of it until, unfortunately, a disaster actually happens. In the preparedness of it and the willingness to actually make sure that we see that this is actually being done, a lot of work needs to be done. Again, I say that, many times we've had opportunity, unfortunately, to see the unpreparedness of government, whose mandate it is to protect its people when it comes to something like this. And I think a lot of work needs to be done, and we can't shy away from that fact.
City.
This, it's unfortunate. Nyeri has actually put up a very sterling argument supporting the government, and in many instances, I actually believe she is right. But it comes from a background where the media has in the past failed to do what it ought to do, so it's getting bad press on this particular issue. But on the issue of flooding, the media has come out and reported on this thing really steadfastly throughout. It can take flag for other issues, but this one, no, it has reported. Whether it's TV, think of any source of media in this country, the media has actually come out. But the government seems to have been caught flat-footed on this one here.
Jerry.
The media has reported the disaster from sort of the happenings perspective, the force majeure, the fact that nature's come in and taken these lives from us, no doubt about that. What the media is failing to report is the government efforts. And as a result, we feel as if the government isn't placing enough emphasis on the relief side of things, and the focus has been on the politics, because that's what we're seeing. The president has released a statement on this. That should have been headlines. Ministers concerned have released statements on this. Should have been headlines if the media were serious about actually reporting an incident such as this.
The media does not just report on headlines, on statements that have been released. The media reports on actions and activities on the ground. So when you have reporters on the ground who are not feeling the presence of the government, they will not report about the presence of the government.
It's very hard for reporters to get to the ground. If relief agencies are having a problem getting there, I doubt you'd have reporters en masse in those areas.
So as I continue, we have reporters on the ground who've been reporting from the ground on this matter across all platforms every day, days on end. And what we are seeing from our leadership, not just the national executive government, but from our leadership, including elected leaders, is wanting. We need to have a conversation that is being spearheaded by the national leadership. Instead of just talking about fighting one another, BBI, yes, is good, but fighting Matiang'i and fighting Ruto is not what should be the focus right now. 100 people are dead, and that should wake us all up. Good morning, it's 12 minutes past 9.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
It's 12 minutes after 9. Good morning, and how are you doing? This is the Kenya's biggest conversation. It's a situation room. My name is Eric Latif. We have CT Muga, we have Nduoko and Nyeri Thorne, and today being Monday, it's Succession Mondays.
Absolutely, and an interesting one this Monday. I'll pick it off the BBI. I read it. I read the full report at the weekend, and something really stuck out to me, and I thought it's something we'd have a conversation about, and it was this idea of a Ministry of Happiness. That is one of the recommendations by the BBI. Of course, this is given that there's been a recent increase in mental health issues. The rates of suicide have gone up. There was a documentary, of course, documenting some suicides that had gone on in Kirinyaga, or in the central area, if you remember, and that was attributed to the fact that the economy wasn't doing so well. But basically the idea there was to capture this mental health issue. Of course, in the UK, they've established a Ministry of Loneliness, and here what you find is more people being alone, or you don't have that sense of community, so again depression creeps in. So one of the recommendations with regards, or rather from the BBI, is to establish a Ministry of Happiness that would look into mental health issues, that would ensure policies are designed to make sure we capture any issues that might lead to mental health. And I think one of them that we saw, interestingly, I could connect the two and I intertwined, was the fact that the commercial betting firms were going to be gagged somewhat, and it would be one firm run by the government. This is an example of an outlet or something that leads also to mental health issues, especially amongst the youth. So it was an interesting one, and I believe there will be a Ministry of Happiness. And also very interesting, it comes at a time where people are discussing, or the conversation in the public sphere is whether GDP should be a real measure for economic growth. And of course, the UN has recognized happiness as an index. And we had this with Bhutan, who first started this when they said they're going to look at the happiness of their people as a measure of development. Development is not simply building, a concrete jungle and having lots of cars and the sort of imagery that we associate with development, but also the mental well-being of our citizenry is important. And so the happiness industry, index, which created an industry, no doubt, but index came about, and the World Happiness Report, it's an annual publication now by the United Nations, and it looks at how people in those countries rate their own lives. And interestingly, you can then now use that index to compare the different systems. So, for instance, it's been used to compare democracies and authoritarian rule, whereby people living in democracies are much more unhappy or less happy than those living in China, than their counterparts living in China under authoritarian rule. So it becomes more informative, an indice, when you're doing measurements for a populace or for a demographic. But in terms of my crystal ball, I foresee a happiness ministry, which is something very different. I think it would be headed by a woman, because I think women
are happier.
This is not women are happier, but women are better equipped in terms of experience and understanding to deal with issues and design policy around children and around family, which I think is one of the core roots of depression as well. You look at me funny. But yes, women are better equipped to design policy when it comes to family-orientated policy.
If you appointed the CS for happiness, what would you do?
Where would I start?
What would the work of this ministry exactly be?
Well, mental health issues. So you deal with there would be preventative measures and curative measures. So for curative measures, I would first of all look to destigmatize mental health, which a lot of countries are working on. But mental health has been stigmatized in this country for a very long time. The idea of depression, people don't talk, they don't speak about it. So from a societal perspective, I'd look to do that, maybe increase access to therapists. I would also perhaps look, one of the things we were discussing recently was the lack of extracurricular activities for the youth. So a lot of people end up in bars, or this is why you have, a drinking subculture in a lot of communities. So maybe set up a different community activities in the different wards, for instance. So a youth forum, or even if it's table tennis, that sort of thing. Just ensure that the youth have something to do other than going to bars, other than drinking. You find that this is what they're partaking in most of the time. Why do you laugh, CT?
The table tennis.
Just an example. Why do you laugh? That's what we had at my youth
Why
club.
did you throw in darts while you're taking?
Yeah, darts.
Well, I mean, if you had
Pool.
things like community centers, which a lot of
Monopoly.
countries have, you have community centers that actually then, did you say monopoly? Where you are encouraging now people to do
you prefer
something.
drafts.
Oh, okay. If you're encouraging people to do something else with their time, and then that's the opportunities where you have a lot of those in cities, whereby you had community centers that were then set up that would actually take people's time, whereby they were actually able to do something constructive with their time.
How is that different from the Ministry of Youth, Gender and...
The Ministry of Youth, Gender
that
and
would be
Sports,
one
do
of
they
the initiatives to
do,
ensure that people have something to do, constructive things to do with their free time. Because when you leave youth, and for me, youth, I think we put the age bracket a little too high when we say 35. I would cut it down to about 25. And those are the people that you'll find will be partaking in sort of activities that are perhaps not as conducive to...
CT doesn't like the table tennis.
No.
Table tennis has really ticked you.
No. It's not even that. We in 2002, we were regarded the most optimistic. Now, optimism is good for happiness. Okay, there's something called things on this planet. Happy Planet Index. Okay, we rank how many? 83rd. 83 out of 140 in the. Okay. In life expectancy, we rank 119th out of 140. In well-being, we rank 108 out of 140. In ecological footprints, we do very well here. We are 13th out of 140. In inequality, we're 117th out of 140. The one thing that seems to be, we are not at the bottom. But if you look at all these figures, we are on
below half.
We are on that last third. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean we are not happy.
Well, right now,
No. And also doesn't mean we are unhappy. Let me explain why I'm saying this. I don't know what questions they asked to arrive at these statistics, but what I do know is this. If we are going to have such a ministry, the first thing you would do is to find out what it is that people would consider the ingredients for happiness. Find out.
well, we'd eliminate the ingredients for unhappiness. If we look at sort of the rates of crime, the femicide that we've been talking about, I think that's pretty indicative as to what is happening in our society. There's a lot of anger as to the root cause of that. It could be the economy, it could be media, it could be the patriarchy re-entrenching itself. But it is definitely reflective of our state of mind as a society.
It's anecdotal. I am talking about actually finding out. Asking. This particular age group you're speaking of, asking. Let them tell you. Don't guess. Don't assume.
If you can take it from, for example, the rates of suicide have risen in this country over the last 1.5 years. 18 months is what the statistics will give you, what the research will show, that in the last 18 months, the rates have actually risen. And interesting enough, of the 3 that I know of personally, people who've written the notes and left them behind that we've then had to bury, will tell you, okay, first of all, I was in debt. I was not able to take care of this. A second was, I actually was not able to provide. I was looking for, but I didn't get. And you know what? Rather than continue in this terrible existence, the thing then was to take my own life and end it all. And the third person, very similar to the second one. Really, I couldn't. I just could not. There was too much. I was in too much debt. People were looking for me every day. I was not able. So you can actually, if we're just using those 3 as an example to be representative of what could be a large part of those who actually take their lives, because when you link that to suicide, you link it to, depression, you link it to not being happy generally. And a lot of the reasons then are given are economical. People people don't have enough, or people are in debt. People are just not.
I know I'm being prescriptive. But one of the reasons why people conduct research is for that very purpose, to be certain, or at least to approach the axioms of certainty to the nth that is humanly possible. So you ask, yes, it is true. The economic, some of the things we say, why I'm saying the anecdote, it is true. These things happen, but they're not the only ones. Before you got into debt, what were the underlying issues that got you into debt? Okay? Now, in addition to the debt existed. But with every 3 people who had debt, I can give you 100 who are probably in worse situations and they're not contemplating suicide. So what other underlying issues were there? Someone who seems to be unhappy, say, with his life or his family life, is there a point at which he was actually happy? What changed? I'm simply saying that the design of the sort of questions that you would ask to understand this would not just capture one. You will talk about someone's personal life, the influence of it, the socioeconomic situations that you speak of. You'll talk about cultural influences. You'll talk about a family. Meaning, by the time you get your information, it will be a composite of many things that you have asked. So you'll be clear. So when you say, something, this percentage of individuals react this way because of this. So you now know. This percentage because of this. You now know. If you are to actually provide a viable solution, you have to know. And for you to know, you need to ask the people whose lives seem to be affected most by the situations we're talking about. Let them tell you. But because they don't live in a vacuum and they live in isolation with either the people who don't fall in that bracket, these people also have to be asked. Because they contribute to some of these pressures that we have here. Whether it's your upbringing, whether it's your socialization, all these things come into play.
Now, looking at the fact that clearly it's something that the Kenya government has taken, the leaders, if we look specifically at BBI now, and it is something that is worrisome. they've gone around the country and they've said, look, based on whom we've spoken to, this is what people say. People are generally not
People are unhappy.
People are unhappy. Whether whatever reason it is for, at this point we're not sure, but across the board people are unhappy. And to raise the happiness index in this country, certain things need to be done. Do you think then that this research that you speak of, CT, then they would actually go into it, the nitty-gritty? Because in order to get the solution, you need to understand fully what the problem is, because then you're not going to prescribe a solution for someone, for the same solution for two people whose unhappiness arrives from two totally different things.
In fact, for instance, let me give you just two extreme examples. If you are talking about someone who is within the age bracket we've been talking about, who say comes from, shall we say, northeastern province, okay? And then you take someone who say comes from, eastern province for that matter, okay? And you ask the same question, you may actually find that they are addressing these issues very, 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 very differently.
Yeah.
And the reason why they're addressing these issues very, very differently is because the circumstances in which they live and what they have to deal with on a daily basis are not necessarily the same. So one person will be happy with owning X.
Yeah.
The other person will be happy with owning Y.
Right.
The other person will be happy. Well, why did I give?
You have somebody who wants to make it through the day alive, right?
Yes, exactly.
Somebody is very happy to go to bed
Someone will
at
be
night.
happy
My
with
heart,
land,
No,
another will be happy
exactly.
with camel.
Exactly.
When these
Yes.
surveys are done, what they do is a perception of how happy somebody perceives themselves to be. So they're not asking you, are you happy? Do you perceive yourself to be? So you can have, as you say, somebody who's striving for basic food and shelter but is still happy, and somebody who has all the wealth in the world but probably has self-esteem issues and is unhappy. So it's measuring all those. But very importantly, it also looks to create a nexus between government and happiness. And I think that's where government comes in. What is the relationship between happiness and government? What role do they play in increasing that figure? And this is why it's important, because for the first time you start to look at people holistically, to understand that people need communities, whatever it is we need. I haven't decided yet. I will when I am CS of happiness.
All right,
But
okay.
you start to look at people holistically, and then you see what the government can do. And I think this would be a brilliant way to inform policy design, whether economic policy, whatever policy it is, if the government is held directly accountable for people's happiness, and a formula can actually be worked out so that, there's different regions, different areas, and local leaders can be told your happiness index is only 4. Can you up that? And there'll be formulas. So this is something that is going to be incorporated into some of these economic formulas that we've seen Adam Smith and all these economists.
And I don't think, actually, no, I am sure that the government has actually never been concerned with how happy its people are, ever.
Indirectly, I mean, you don't want an uprising, so you ensure that people are at least fed.
It doesn't look at happiness at that
It doesn't look at it's not a priority.
From that lens.
I don't think
I
many
don't think
governments
it's-
have.
it's not a
until
priority
maybe
for them
7-8
to say,
years ago.
let's make sure that our people are actually happy. No. It's about, at the very least, providing
Actually, not even providing.
Survival.
Contained.
contain them. It's not a
Contained.
matter of
No,
how
no,
they're
no.
happy. They could
Yes.
care less if you're happy. Smile on your face, frown on your face. It doesn't
Find
really
your own
matter.
happiness.
That's
But
your
the world
problem.
is a
Ours is to run the
fast-changing-
country.
It's a fast-changing place, and Kenya doesn't fall behind with the youth and what it is, and access to information and technology, because technology actually affects happiness. It's one of the things they look at with some of these happiness perception indexes and so on. Kenyans are up to par on that. There's nobody missing out. Information is evenly distributed globally. Just because somebody is watching something somewhere in Russia, it doesn't mean we can't anymore, depending on your social class.
Let me pick
it's
a
not
call.
like it used to be.
Elijah is in Nairobi. Good morning, Elijah.
Morning, how are you?
Very well,
Fine.
thank you.
Yes, just wanted to comment on the Ministry of Happiness. Sounds interesting. I find it interesting that the government wants to develop a ministry to either assess or provide something that would be there if they were doing everything else. The next thing they'll do is give us a Ministry of Prosperity to assess whether or not we prosper, instead of just enabling an environment for prosperity. If you have an environment that enables happiness, it does not eliminate depression, anxiety, mood disorders, and all of that, which should be handled by the Ministry of Health. But when you take the example of a clinical condition to prescribe I don't even know if it's societal, to prescribe another ministry,
I just find it fallacious.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I get what they're saying, and WHO has said now happiness is an index. But check the countries that are actually happy. How many of them have a Ministry of Happiness? Or how many of them just do their job?
But I could argue inversely and say places like Norway, where the GDP is very high. In fact, as opposed to being in debt, I think each member of the public is owed something like £20,000 by the government because of their investments.
Millions.
Well,
It's millions.
each individual, 20 million? I think
No,
£20,000.
it's millions.
some
Right.
millions
Well,
of
it's
dollars.
it's an economy that's been it's doing very well, and it has what you're advocating for, a conducive environment to prosper and to ensure people are happy. Yet you have one of the highest rates of suicide there, and you have a lot of depression in these Western countries. In fact, depression.
That is true. But there's another issue. For example, if you go to the UK, one of the reasons they have Ministry of Loneliness is because they have something called seasonal affective disorder. The brain responds a certain way to natural light. In temperate climates where you don't have enough natural light, there is a clinical consequence that will lead to depression.
Right. So why shouldn't that fall under the Ministry of Health?
It should. That's what I said. It should fall under the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Health should have programs. There's a mental health awareness day, and those things exist.
No, what I mean, in the UK, they've established a Ministry of Loneliness, whereas you say season-acquired depression, which is completely clinical, but they've gone as far as recognizing, actually, this is a societal issue. If we're going to look at this index and respect it, we need to establish a ministry, because there you have a lot of genuine loneliness, because, of course, the population is, the elderly, for instance, the sort of life expectancy is much higher. You don't have the family units that we have today. So it's beyond just governmental setups. It's to do with community and societal setups and so forth, and work-life balance.
That brings us back to CT's statement of asking the people what makes you happy. Because loneliness in the UK, granted, you don't have the societal structures, you have family breakdown. If you look at Japan, the government incentivizes dating and marriage because the cost of these things was so prohibitive, people would prefer to just play video games. And so the government then says, you know what, I'd rather step in and try and convince this young guy to marry this young girl. But Kenya is a very stoic country. Kenya is a country where when things are bad, we make jokes out of it. It's a coping mechanism.
Humor is an escape.
But one of our solutions is to make each other happy. For you to then say we are unhappy and we need to fix it through the government that makes us largely unhappy. I am very surprised by that.
Elijah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Elijah.
This is the BBI.
0719-012-600. Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads. Good morning. 28 minutes to 10.
Online, mobile, and on radio. This is Spice FM.
Introducing Glovo, the app that delivers anything you want. When your bestie is over and you crave nyama choma or maybe a burger, order Glovo and get your food delivered. Yum yum! When you're missing the right ingredient for your wonderful meal, order Glovo and wow the ones you love. When she's made an oopsie and there's no diapers left, order Glovo and save the day. Download the Glovo app today, and when you need anything, order Glovo and we'll deliver it in minutes.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Traffic.
Alright, from Outer Ring Road to Kiambu Road to Mombasa Road to everywhere you look, basically, traffic has piled up. Kiambu Road, unfortunately, now further, interestingly enough, because of the poor state of roads, the residents have decided to set tires ablaze, so you're not going anywhere, unfortunately. They're demonstrating the poor roads in the area, compounding the traffic this morning, so unfortunately, Outer Ring is going to be a mess until the security forces get in place. That is not going to open up. Interestingly, paradoxical in nature. Here we go on to Mombasa Road, whereby traffic is chock-a-blocked all the way from Syokimau to the General Motors section of the road. Let's see what happens after that. Trying to get to the Nyayo Nyayo Stadium roundabout. So, but for now, it's not looking good across the city, and it's wet conditions, poor sight. So, sorry guys, it's a Monday morning, and everything coming along with the Monday blues. Add a dash of traffic to that.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
The Ministry of Happiness. You know, Elijah brought up something that I actually was thinking of raising. Why must we have it as a ministry? Can't we just have it as an authority? Like the way we have the National
Disaster
Campaign,
Management Authority.
NACADA, the one that faces, Employment Authority. Just have it as an authority. One of the reasons why I'm saying that is, as a ministry, of course, it requires a huge budgetary allocation. And budgetary allocation, a lot of it will go to paying recurrent expenditure.
But it would
Office
also be
space,
saving
paying
money
people.
if we're saving people from alcoholism, which is a cost on our health system. If you have a universal health care, it could also be saving people money from drug addiction, rather the government money from having to treat drug addiction, liver cirrhosis, and
An
so on.
authority, on the other hand,
But,
an authority would conduct.
You've
like
got to
a
look
te-
at the flip side.
the test that
but the
the
UHC
authority
right
would
now
do.
has been put on hold.
Because there's no money.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no money.
But by the way, the UN beat us to this. You know, they actually have a World Happiness Council. They do. And they even rank. Now, some of the things they consider in ranking or in questioning, they look at a country's GDP. There's a
Right.
GPD.
You did
Great
a
Britain
number.
pounds.
There's a G and there's a D and there's a P
There's a
somewhere in
P,
it.
right.
Okay, now rearrange it as you say.
As you like.
Gross domestic product.
Yeah, exactly. The product, the domestic, and the gross. Now, they will ask you about this. They then ask about social support. Okay. They then ask about health and life expectancy. Then they ask about perception to corruption. And then they ask the freedom to make choices. Now, these are some of the questions they ask, and the responses give them this. Now, in this particular country, now, let's start with the continent. Believe it or not, number one, Libya, happiest.
But they were very happy.
This is
When was
which
this?
year?
Yeah.
I'm talking about 2017. eh?
17.
Yes.
And I think the happiness is the dregs of what they were under with Gaddafi. Even under Gaddafi, they were extremely happy.
That was
They were
skewed
very
by the
happy.
West.
It was then skewed. The
Yeah,
happiness
the
was.
West painted a really dreary image of Libya, didn't
The
they?
Libyans were
They were
very
okay.
happy. They were
They were
very
okay.
happy
They were
under
okay
Gaddafi.
before
Yes.
Gaddafi.
Okay.
They were okay. They were okay. They were okay.
As you
Next.
get that, can we pick
Continue?
from Lydia?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Hello.
Hi, Lydia.
Hello, Spice FM.
Morning,
Thank you
Lydia.
for this important subject. Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to comment to say that happiness, it says never be angry. It heats up the brain to boiling point and it can trigger up madness, heart attack, or stroke.
Aneurysms. Yep, absolutely.
Yes. So that means if I'm angry with you, I should never say, you stupid, you. I should never let you know I'm angry. I should just discuss with you, you know, how shall we solve this solution and whatever.
So
If we get angry, if I am angry with you, I am damaging my health, not your health.
absolutely.
So I always have to be forgiving to you so that my health improves.
True.
And this is a very important subject to all the teachers from nursery school up to professor school. They should always teach this part of the subject.
Thank you, Lydia.
About never allowing yourself to be unhappy. Thank you.
Thank you. So
Your happiness begins with you.
Some
Yes.
self-regulation there.
Yes,
Emotional
yes.
intelligence.
Now, there's one last thing that they considered. That was the dictatorial government.
Sorry, Siti, before you go there.
Yes.
You were talking about some of the nations. If you start with
And
Africa,
Libya was
you
number
started
one.
with Libya.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we were
Libya was
waiting.
number one. Number two was Nigeria.
All right. Oh, that's why.
I wanted. You see why I was prompting you to name.
What
So
makes
this
you
is from the
Nigerians
bottom, right?
happy?
Because
I see what you're doing.
This
Libya.
is number one.
Libya, Nigeria.
Number three.
Happiest or least?
Algeria. Happiest. And then alongside Nigeria, Kenya.
Alongside Nigeria is in second.
Tying a third.
Algeria. Number three.
Tying
Oh,
third.
alongside Algeria.
Algeria.
Oh, we're
Yes.
third.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And yes. Now, what is of interest is that on this continent, the people who unfortunately were first from the bottom, South Sudan,
Yeah.
Understandably.
unhappy, turmoil, etc., etc., etc.
Yes,
Second
ravaged
least
by
happy.
civil war, epidemic, hunger.
As if that is going to help. Let's look at the West. You're already third. Be happy. Okay.
Take that. Be happy.
Happiest in the West?
Finland. And then followed by other Nordic countries. And then you throw in Canada, you throw in Switzerland. Yes. But again, you see, if you look at Finland, you know some of the things those people like: outdoor life, saunas, fishing. One could call it a very rural
These are the
existence.
extracurricular activities I was talking about. So what makes you happy is people, places, things. And if you focus,
This
when
is
I
where
have
table
my
tennis comes in.
happiness
Yes,
ministry.
that's where table tennis
Table
comes.
tennis was an example.
It's a thing.
It's a
It
good
made
example.
me happy when I was younger. For instance, at a youth club or a community club, table tennis is harmless and it keeps you busy, and it's pretty relatively cheap to run and maintain, I think. But if you look at people, places, things, so you look at the people and how we interact with each other, so our social activities and the communities, and we talked about breakdown of family, and then you look at the things that people do, and you have to create extracurricular activities so that people are not bored, people are not sort of engaging in let's say porn or drinking or what have you, because there's options. And you do find, I'll be honest with you, in Kenya it's very difficult to find something to do that doesn't involve going to a bar. If you're meeting somebody, it's going to a bar. Generally speaking, you're going to end up drinking. I find there's very little. I don't know, CT.
There's a
Maybe
place
it's
called Java.
Maybe it's the people. Yeah, but Java, you hang out for an hour and then
you're
But it's choices.
Yeah.
You can drink tea. You can
You
drink
can
a
go to
smoothie.
Karura. You can go to Karura Forest and take
walk.
a
Yeah, but generally
Or go to
speaking, as
Arboretum.
social activities, very few people are going to want to do that with you. So
There's a breakdown
if
of
you
social
want to even,
halls.
and even you want to meet people, let's say, so it's not just you and your friend going to Karura. You want to go out and meet people. Where would you do this other than church or a bar in Kenya? That's what I've found, generally speaking. So perhaps these are some of the things I would consider when looking at a happiness ministry. But of course, I think some of these things come as a luxury, because you do need the basics. Even if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you do need food, shelter, and security in the first instance before you can start sort of looking at, self-actualization, happiness, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so
and
I
I
would
think that's
say-
the point Elijah was trying to make.
Eric,
Yeah,
you
so
asked-
we've jumped
you-
a couple
sorry.
of. No, we've
No,
jumped.
Eric asked a question. Let me answer him. Bottom, Yemen, Afghanistan, Central African Republic.
Central African Republic.
Yeah, you
Yes.
can see what's happening.
Which ones had an emperor?
And now they have arms from Russia.
Right.
Their happiness will actually decrease.
Yes, the little that they do have. But I think we've jumped a couple of steps, when we want to talk about, say, okay, set up something like this, because you need to make sure. I think you look at a lot of the countries that have actually actualized. There's certain things that they can now start doing other things and talk about,
You think
investing
this is
in
a
happiness.
luxury or a secondary right, a secondary privilege.
It's something that you make sure you put in place after certain things have been taken care of. Do your people generally have access to food? 1, 2, 3. Do they have access to the things that they need, for example, to get farm to market, roads, infrastructure? Are those things
Happiness and outcome.
of those things?
I think
Of
you-
this
you-
input
you do
and,
need
and
an
these
element.
and these are the inputs. These are the inputs.
It's an
You put
outcome.
these things in, and the outcome that you get is happiness. So if you are not getting happiness, then you've not put in what you need to do. And I think it's clear. The BBI team, it's clear to them that generally Kenyans are not.
I think some of the activities that actually you're also talking about, the social halls and all, they are an avenue to let out steam. They are important. So yes, you may not have 100% of the basics covered, but when you have a place where you go and socialize and you get your mind busy and
Okay, that's a
engage
good
else
point.
how.
So you don't have to have reached that
You
level
don't
of
have to.
development before in sort of investing in a happiness ministry. that
Yes, if
gives
you see the
some of
places where the social halls are thriving, in parts of Eastlands where people like the Boxers, Arika, have thrived, and where Congestina, went. These are places where it's a social hall. It was actually an old social hall made in the olden days, and it
So
was
even then they figured
dilapidated.
it out that it was
They had
necessary.
figured it out.
Yeah.
In every area, you required a place where people can come and socialize,
In fact,
and it's important.
But the
in
point
fact,
is,
yes. Please
I
carry
was going
on.
to say, the point is, even with all these developments, and we don't have to wait, we can learn from the West, even with all the developments, happiness is still an issue. Do you
It
see what I
is.
mean?
It is. But ask yourself, in an African setting, what do you think were the hallmarks of happiness? What are the indicators? What is it that someone you could look at and say, so and so is happy? And the happiness, as I said, is derivative. It is after what is it? Usually, for instance, we talked about these results of KCPE. It is on the happiest time for the students and the parents. They're happy.
Those who've passed, of course.
Those who passed.
It's a requirement, actually. With happiness also goes unhappiness, all right? If you are traditionally minded and you felt that you are looking after your family well, okay, you would be happy. If you were achieving your educational goals or prosperity goals, you would be happy. Now, but let's talk about the community I come from. Traditionally, it didn't end there. It ended with how well you extended this particular lajis to the community. Because they then bestowed upon you respect.
Yes.
That was also a source of happiness. Yes. Now, if your children simply were well brought up, forget school, just well brought up, well disciplined, well behaved, a source of happiness. So it's many things. Now, fast forward to modern times. What is it? I've heard of situations where there is a party held when a son or daughter goes home because they've bought a car and they drive home. The home now has a car. It's a source of happiness.
Well, yeah, this evolving with the times,
Fast forward, modern times. Now, what the government seems to be saying, and what I get is this. If they were able, and the gentleman who called, what was his name again?
Elijah.
I was about to call him Shadrach. I don't know where Shadrach came from, but Elijah, yes. Elijah actually got it spot on. If the government actually ensures that people have good health care, you have hope for prospects that you have in mind, what's going to stop you from being happy?
Well, this is the thing. I said that, but look at some of these Scandinavian countries where suicide rates are very high. So somewhere like Norway, where you still have high suicide rates, yet they have everything they need. So I think there's more to it.
But I think then it's necessary to then that kind of those kind of questions then need to be asked, because the reasons why people would commit suicide, for example, in Kenya are not the reasons why people would commit suicide in Finland or Norway, for example.
Actually, the question,
That's a good point.
What Nyeri raises is an extremely valid one, and in answering the question that you've posed, you'd arrive at a good answer.
Exactly.
Good. It's 14 minutes to 10 o'clock. We're discussing the happiness index. Jerry is proposing, actually saying that now that BBI has actually talked about the country focusing on happiness, maybe there should be a creation of a happiness ministry.
They will be, according to my crystal ball.
In your crystal ball,
And it
there
will be headed by a female.
By a female.
A lady.
Called
Jerry.
Did the BBI not propose this?
Yes, this is where it's all,
The 80s have never sounded so good.
My favorite songs of the 1980s.
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Get up, Steve. This is an office, not your bedroom.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened.
You are trying to get fired. I don't pay you to sleep. I pay you to work.
I'm sorry, boss. This is the only place I get any sleep. I can't sleep a week on my mattress at home. But at the office, the seats are so comfortable. They soothe me to sleep every time.
Why are you trying so hard to lose your job when all you need to do is to get yourself a Superform mattress?
Get yourself a Superform Premium or Morning Glory mattress today and get the best of your sleep. Available in many colors. Call 0755-101-731 to place your order today. Superfoam. We are good in bed.
You have to find someone else to fire.
Welcome to Spice FM, the best exclusive radio station bringing you the best mix of the best music ever.
Phone lines are open 0719-012-600, 0719-012-600. What do you make of a happiness ministry for the Republic of Kenya? Well, the BBI has recommended that we make something out of it, right? These happiness manenos. And then Jerry's crystal ball this morning is actually showing her that there will be. When? In this current government or in the next one?
No, I think in the next government they'll establish a Ministry of Happiness.
Why don't they start with just a Department of Happiness and then see if they can grow it into a ministry?
That's what I'm saying. Let's start with an agency, an authority. So this one does all the work. Then it advises the government. The government implements a policy. So various government ministries and departments will therefore, of course, roll out these programs that are all tied towards creating the happiness.
In fact, I'm thinking of this particular department that Dr. Ezekiel Mutua heads.
right.
Yes. They're watching movies.
The Kenya Film Board.
No, it's actually Kenya Film Classification
Board.
The movie watching one.
Yes. See, it's effective because they listen to music. they provide a certain balance when it comes to these things related to entertainment.
They're known for censorship, actually, because they.
No, I
people
think
don't feel-
this authority would have all these kind of people that you were talking about. You know, sociologists, to have people who are well versed in medical areas and psychiatry and psychology. They do all these things. That would be better. Then they can advise the government based on
programs that they need to then initiate and establish
roll out.
Eric,
to
you
roll
mentioned
out.
everything,
I think the
but you
reason
haven't
it-
mentioned people who understand research.
Yeah, and research.
You know, it's
I was
a
pointing at
different, it's
you.
a
and
different discipline altogether.
I thought pointing at you was actually heading
No.
taking us there.
This is the thing about being African. The fact that you're pointing at me, you believe all our readers
I
know,
have said-
our listeners know you're pointing at me. Tell them you're pointing at me.
Let's take this one. This is James. James, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good
Salama
morning.
kabisa. Where are you today?
I'm along Thika Road at the moment.
Oh no.
How is Thika Road?
Oh my God.
Uh-huh.
That's
The
enough.
parking lot.
That's enough. Are you happy or not?
I create my own happiness.
Oh, yeah.
But when you say the government to create a happiness ministry,
Gumu, gumu.
that's a comedy. That's a comedy by itself. Because happiness can never be artificial.
The thought makes you happy.
No, it's.
It has to come from inside. As I like to say it, if the government like facilitate whatever health care, taxes are lowered, things are working out, we all be generally happy. We don't need the happiness minister. I think if we create that happiness minister, the only guy who will be happy now is the happiness minister. Having a lot of money.
You'll be having a lot of money.
Yes. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, James. Good day. Good
All
day.
right.
All the best with traffic. 0719-012-600. What do you make of that? Happiness, Ministry of Happiness. Or should we call it Happiness? No, Ministry of Happiness. Headed by a female CS. And then, of course, it rolls out programs that ensure that the country is generally happy. So who does the survey then? The ministry? Or should it be an independent audit?
Why don't they just get people who actually know how to do these things to do it for them? Then the results will actually be more trusted.
It'll work.
No, it'll be trusted. People will feel these were independent, and these are people who are known to do this sort of research. They better still, why don't they just ask the UN to help them do this, because they've been doing it for some time now.
Yeah, and we're never shy about asking for help in terms of, extending a hand to say, please assist us here and there. So you look really concerned about making the people of Kenya happy, then you can, extend the hand of, need and say, please, how did you do this? Show us then how to do it. Because clearly for this one, you're going to need a lot of external intervention to actually make sure that it is done and done right. Because then you're dealing beyond the actual hard needs of people, and now you're dealing with something psychological.
The proposal is actually that there should be a department of happiness. I'm the one who's putting the proposal forward that it should be a ministry, because in the UK you have the Ministry of Loneliness, which in essence is the same thing. I think they should go further in that it shouldn't fall. It's not just a health-related issue. It's not just mental health. Mental health is actually the symptom of it in terms of something manifests itself as depression. But it's the breakdown of society. It's maybe the lack of opportunities. So it's such a complex matrix that leads to happiness or unhappiness, then I think a ministry would be best suited for this. A ministry that then interacts and works very closely with certain other ministries. So yes, the Ministry of Health in terms of ensuring mental health, but also the Ministry of Youth, Labour, and so forth. The Treasury itself in terms of taxes we talked about. Somebody said if the taxes are low, they'll be happy. So it would be good to do a BBI on what would make people happy. So do a sort of round around the country and see what would make people happy. But yes, definitely a ministry, I think. Happiness, I think, plays down the importance of this ministry. But if we say social welfare and well-being, then you start to see the importance of this. And then you can have it split into, different policies for different demographics. I
think there'll be knowing this country, there'll be competition, inter-ministerial competition. So, for instance, if you're talking about this Ministry of Sports and Culture, and then the other one of Labour and Social Services, and then you bring another one for happiness, this happiness ministry may not be able to implement all the policies and programs. It has to go and use
There'll
the other
be a competition for resources or for implementation?
For
because
resources.
If it's for implementation, then it
You see,
works
implementation
brilliantly
means
for the
resources.
citizenry.
Implementation means resources. So that each ministry wants to say, this is my turf and I want to protect my turf. If you actually make it like an agency that works with all the ministries, like the Vision 2030 board.
Right.
It works
Absolutely.
with all
Okay, that's
ministries
another
that
way
goes,
to do it.
And works in I can come to your ministry and see what are you doing to take us towards the social pillars, the economic pillar, the political pillar.
But then I wouldn't be CS then, so it's important that
this is a problem.
according to my crystal ball.
You'd be a director
Everything
general.
according to the elements of the crystal ball must all be taken into consideration.
You'd be a director general at the level of PS.
No, but okay, no. On a serious note, you're right. Maybe a board that actually advises and sort of runs. There's a running thread of this board, this happiness board, across all ministries. So any policy that is passed has to be happiness centered. And has to go through my board to make sure that it falls into the ambit of what we believe happiness to be. And then make it our national ethos that we're aiming to be on top, because this is something we can do. We don't need the financial muscle when it comes to this indice, global indice that is. So it's something that we can do, that we're aiming to be on top of this index in the next 5 years.
We beat Nigeria first of
all. No, Nigeria, remember this is Africa. Nigeria is not on top of the world.
Within the first 3 months, we beat Nigeria.
Right.
Then now we go to for the rest of the world.
Why is Nigeria up there? What puts Nigeria up there?
Because I think, just looking at, I think Nigerians collectively decided to make their own happy. And I've talked about this before.
That's what James is saying.
I've talked about
Make
this
your own
before.
happiness.
No, it's true. We talked about this before, because in terms of what government was able to do for you, there was a lot of lack in terms of the provision of basic services. And so I think there was an unspoken agreement for a lot of Nigerians to say, we're going to go ahead and do this for ourselves. And regardless of it, you are creating that for yourself, which you've seen that there's a lack in. And people said, you know what?
You know something
Let's do it.
You may actually be right in what you were asserting earlier on. Maybe, because Tanzania is 153 out of 156. From the bottom up, yes, they're
in the world.
Out of the 156 countries,
Right. Pretty chilled out about it, considering.
Yes, because now Burundi,
Yes.
Africa, bottom. Okay, let's start with 148. Haiti,
Yeah.
Liberia, Syria, Rwanda, Yemen, Tanzania, South Sudan, Central African Republic, Burundi. Africa.
And it's interesting that Rwanda is there with the same kind of dictatorship that we talked about, where you would expect that the people would be happy when things are being done for
Was
them.
Rwanda in that list?
Rwanda is
Yeah,
there.
oh, yes.
Yes, it is.
Rwanda is 151 out of 156.
Let me
But
tell you,
what's
the moment they said that
Tanzania-
Libyans are the happiest, I just dismissed this list.
No, but you need to look at what
do you
really
know
was
about
happening.
Libya?
You need to look. No.
2017.
You need to know. Gaddafi was dead in 2017.
Exactly.
This is
Gaddafi
what I'm
was good
saying.
though, no?
No, this is what I'm saying.
Apparently.
Under Gaddafi, the people of Libya were provided for. The people of Libya were happy.
Yes.
Economically, they were actually, in terms of where the
Under
bar was
Gaddafi,
set,
yes.
under Gaddafi.
Right now, are they?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
know.
what I'm saying. I'm saying
There's no
the
functional
dregs,
government
but
in
the
Ni- in-
dregs,
one of the questions
the
that
dregs
asked-
of
The
that
remnants.
happiness, the
These-
remnants,
these
the
are the
dregs.
remnants
These are
of
the
the
remnants of the
Gaddafi.
happiness that they're still feeling now. So
Look,
the man must have
there
done a
were
very
people
good
who
job,
were unhappy
even
under
to the point that
Gaddafi.
in death
With
they
Gaddafi
are still
gone, now they're
experiencing.
Now they're happy.
They're happy.
Okay.
Look at it like that.
The Benghazi people are happy. In fact, they made an interview with the Benghazi side. of
You could
the
look at it
country.
like that, or you can say that the remnants of it, they were actually quite happy.
You
There's-
really stretched it.
There's a gentleman called Bertrand Russell in his book, The Conquest of Happiness. He says some of the common causes of unhappiness in modern day life. Now, this list is interesting. Some, okay? He says meaninglessness, competition, boredom, fatigue, envy, guilt, shame, mania, fear of public opinion. Now,
Those things make you happy.
no, these are the causes of
unhappiness.
unhappiness.
Got it.
As we wind up.
Yes.
And then the BBI touched on them, probably inadvertently, without realizing. Things like our national ethos as well, I think.
Yes.
I think touches on this, our values. And then the idea of envy, and with this wealth acquisition culture, you can see where a lot of unhappiness comes
it's
from.
coming from.
And if our aspirations don't match our reality because the government doesn't provide a platform for everybody to own a Range Rover, then of course you're going to find people who are very unhappy, if what you're being